Calling this meeting to order, Monday, August 14th, 6 p.m. Chair, can you roll call, please?
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
Here. This is an open meeting and has been posted. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, we'll be moving on to citizens' comments.
Kathleen Casio, you have 3 minutes, and I'll give you a warning at 30 seconds, okay? Thank you.
Yeah, if you can move that mic close to you, that'd be great. Thank you.
How's this? Good? Everybody good?
Erica?
Good evening. I have been asked to make a statement on behalf of the past and present student representatives. My name is Kathleen Casio. I am a community member and MHS teacher with children currently in the Mukwonago schools. I was a member of the interview process that vetted and chose our current student reps. This is an emissary role that requires continual interaction with students, staff, teams, clubs, and organizations. While important, this structured communication is beyond the spontaneous conversations at sporting events or in line at Culver's. This is a unique and valuable resource that allows our board to routinely receive direct, valid information and perspective from those who live its policies day to day. One of the many things that makes Mukwonago unique is that students have always been encouraged to participate at the district level and allowed to have a voice. To limit that insight will not make this body more efficient, more effective, or stronger. I agree that the student reps should not be at the same level as an elected official, so they do not vote or make decisions. They do hold an elevated status beyond the average citizen by completing board tasks and communicating between students, staff, and community. While these are two exceptional individual students who each applied, interviewed, and relished this opportunity, they are a team. Their role is to fulfill the current district expectations and to be available to respond to board inquiries as they present themselves. If the purpose of this governing body is to support and guide the building of better schools together, why limit a directly chosen resource for that purpose? Continued civil discussion is what keeps us connected to one another, guides our common goals, and allows our district to thrive. Please allow the student representatives to continue to be a part of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Kyle Lorenzen.
Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Kyle Lawrenson. I am here to defend the right for our students in the Mukwonago School District to be represented fairly on the school board and be involved in discussion. The valuable insight provided by students is the key this board holds to unlocking meaningful policies on issues that matter to students and have a positive effect every day that they are in place. Limiting communication from selected representatives to emails and reports is not the same as participating in discussion and will be the downfall of our district's success and effectiveness. I do not see the slightest need for this long-standing policy to be changed. If the amendment to this policy is pushed through, the board will no longer have a first-hand perspective they can reference in discussion. This policy change can only result in miscommunication between the board and the student body. It is my hope that this policy change is not passed and this link of communication is not severed. Thank you for allowing me to express my concern.
Thank you.
Madeline Wilhelm.
Thank you for letting me speak. As a previous student representative to the school board, I am disappointed and confused by the changes being proposed for this position. I am disappointed that members of this school board feel the students who experience the repercussions of their actions do not deserve a voice in discussions or even a seat at the big kid table. I am utterly confused by the lack of continuity between their past statements and the actions they are now considering. In the first board meeting I attended as a representative a year ago, members of this board had concerns about students being indoctrinated by ideas that they felt their constituents would not approve of. To quote Vito Schwartz, representative, "As parents, school board members, and all of us, our job is to try to avoid you, students, being told what to think. We want you to be taught how to think." How do these words reflect the message that you, the board, are sending to students with this proposed action? You want students to learn to think for themselves and become prepared for their futures outside of this district, and yet you wish to remove their peers from a place in which they can share their voices and opinions. Following that August 2022 meeting, my fellow representative and I were applauded by multiple members of this current school board and told to keep speaking up and continue asking questions even if it led to debate. When did support for students to be freely and boldly represented in debate become something to silence? Without freely asked questions, open debate, and keen insight from student representatives on this board, the students of this district will lose their voice. This board should be serving as a demonstration of local democracy to its students. It is important that this school board remember that they, just like the student representatives that they are seeking to silence, are just that, representatives. Representatives of not only the parents and community members who elected him, but also their constituents for whom they make decisions and who do not yet have a vote. This is a democracy, a government in which the people hold the power. People, not just adults. I urge this board to remember that they are part of a democracy. They are elected officials who cannot do their job properly if the students whose education they control are cut out of the conversation. Is a voice and a seat at the table too much for the students of this district to ask for? It hasn't been for 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sophia Elba? Sophia? Sophia?
Yeah, Sophia. All right, hi, I'm Sophia, a recent graduate of MHS. Throughout this whole debate of student representatives, I do not understand why Kylie and her fellow student representative, Kyle, had to go through a long and detail-oriented process of application to represent the students of Mukwonago High School and the district. Only to have the same amount of time that everyone else in the community and any other student could have. Throughout my years at MHS, I have been thankful to know that there were student representatives communicating the opinions of my fellow peers at the table in conversation with the board. Changing this policy would be a disgrace to the future of Mukwonago High School and the district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ava Elba.
Hello. I'm a student at MHS, and I believe the true issue in question is whether or not it is fair to non-elected citizens if student representatives are allowed to engage in conversation with elected members of the board. While these students are, in your technical terms, not elected, they were in fact selected. By definition, being selected means being carefully chosen as best fit or most suitable. In this case, these two students are carefully selected as best qualified for their position out of a designated group of students who also applied for the same position. However, the non-elected citizens that are allowed a specified time to speak during the meetings were not carefully chosen out of a separate group of people. This is unfair to the student representatives that had to go through an entire process in order to obtain their job. Being allowed a time slot of 2 minutes of voicing one's opinion is not the same as fully engaging in a conversation. As it was mentioned in an email, students would have the option to send emails to the board to express concerns. However, in my own experience and what I've seen from other students, we have all received copy and pasted email responses. This leads me to believe that some members aren't genuinely concerned about student voices, and I urge you all to keep this policy untouched so that student representation is ensured. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sealy, is that correct?
No, it's Kaylee.
Okay,
Yeah, it's spelled weird.
okay, excuse me. Haley, thank you.
Yeah, it's Kaylee.
Haley.
I've been a student at Mukwonago for 4 years. This is my senior year, and this is the first time in 4 years that I have felt like that you guys are actively working against me. As a student at Mukwonago, I feel that these representatives represent me very well, and they live my day-to-day, every day. You guys no longer go to Mukwonago if you ever have, and you will never be a high school student again and live this opportunity again. And I feel it's important for students who live my day-to-day to represent me, because I don't feel that you guys can accurately tell me how I feel every single day. And I think it's important that they get to keep their position because they have tried very hard to get to the position that they are in and work harder than most other students that I have seen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Claire?
Hello, my name is Claire Sheik. I'm going into my senior year at Mukwonago High School. I think it's important that we have student representatives because, like previous people have said before me, you guys are not in high school, and no matter when you graduated, you will never be going to high school in the same environment and time that we are right now. And I think it's very important that we have people who are living our day-to-day lives, although may not exactly, but also if we have a problem, we can go up to them in lunch or in a class we share together and express our concerns for them to bring to you, the board, because they're going through, they probably have the same concerns. It's easier to talk to them. We get a quick response. They can go and talk to you, engage you in discussion for long periods of time if that is still the case afterwards. Although we cannot, as citizens, we can just have 2 minutes. With the current situation, they could go and bring all of our concerns and engage you in conversation, and I think it's very important that we're heard as students because this is the school board. We are going to school, and we're the ones that live based off of your decisions. Our future, based off of our current education, is based off of your decisions, and I think it's very important that students are a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ceres?
All right. My name is Cerise, and I'm a senior this year. There are problems in your schools that staff know nothing about. The only people who know are your very own students. School is not the same as it was 40 years ago. To break out of your mindset of what once was, you need to hear right from the source. The dynamic between students changes every year. When I was in middle school, I never heard targeted language as much as I have heard on my own bus coming out of the mouths of 13-year-olds. Now that I'm going into my senior year, I'm making it my mission to look out for my peers and make them feel like their voices are important and heard. By passing this policy, you are saying that the voices of every MASD student is not valuable and need to be silenced. The students in your district are not against you. We want you to succeed and make changes that will better your system. If you care about the safety of children like you say you do, you will open your hearts and minds to the feedback given to you by the student body. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kylie?
Hello, my name is Kylie Rich. I'm a senior at MHS, and I'm also one of the selected students to serve as a student representative on the school board for this year. When I heard about the possible revision to policy 0141.1, I was frustrated at the fact that this would be detrimental to student voices and representation. I want to take the time to share some clarifications that I have come to discover. First off, we are non-voting, simply advisory. There was a concern mentioned by one of the members that they don't want us to have more power than any other citizen, which we don't. However, we went through a long application process where we got 2 letters of recommendation and interviewed in front of a panel of teachers and were hand-selected by 2 board members themselves. What was this process worth if I'm viewed as a regular citizen and allowed only 2 minutes and minor time for a simple board report? Another concern was that our roles would enable government officials to properly do their jobs. This advisory position has been around since 2003. So you're telling me that for 20 years, board members have been enabled? I don't see why the change would need to be now if that was the case. With that being said, I urge you all as elected officials to listen to the voices of our community and its students. You all should have received a petition that I created, and it has gotten 400+ signatures in less than 2 full days. You've also now heard from multiple students and community members so far tonight. Student voices need to be heard for more than a mere 2 minutes in a brief board report that lacks vital student representation. As said in by the board president in an email, we are the singular voice for all students in the school district. Therefore, we need a seat at the table to ensure student voices are not silenced. After all, students are the ones that are being most impacted by the decisions that this board makes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Diego.
Hi, Diego.
Hello, everyone. It's been a long 3 months of being here. So I have this. You can start the timer. I have this whole thing written out, but I don't want to go into that right now. I want to be real. We've heard a lot of very good points, a lot of impassioned statements from students, but I do just want to bring up one argument. I would like to refute one argument that is in favor of this revision to the policy. That is that the student board representatives are not elected officials, which is true. They're not elected by the general populace, but the need for student representatives arises precisely because they represent the one biggest disenfranchised group in Mukwonago, the students who are not legally allowed to vote. That is, I think, I don't know how to put it. I think, in my opinion, the biggest issue that is going on with this debate is that the student representatives are viewed as another member of the board, even though they're not. Like, we've talked about how they don't have voting rights, all these sorts of the differences between you and what I was last year. Please, listen to the people. As she said, there is a petition with over 400 signatures from students in the high school who disagree with this. Students who otherwise would not have been involved with this board. Don't fall for pseudo-arguments about voting and unelected officials, because that is precisely why we're here, to represent the people who can't vote for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Art?
Hello there, guys.
Hello, Art.
Hi, Art.
So I came here with a lot written down, policies, things that we keep referring back to students, their input, the information they give us. After listening to these kids, I foolishly thought I had to come here to defend them. I served 15 years on this school board, and they are the most valuable part of our discussions. They represent all the students. They have always done so much. I've always sat next to them. I encouraged them to get involved in discussions. Why you guys would want to make a change to this policy is beyond me. I must have missed something that they did to someone, because it's ridiculous. It's worked so well for all the years I've been involved. And why you would change it, I have no clue, unless you just don't want to hear about what the students have to give us. They know everything firsthand. They're the most valuable resource we have here. So you'd be foolish to change this policy. All right? Thank you.
Thanks, Art.
Thanks, Art. That's it.
All right, citizens' comments are over. We are going to move on to consent agenda. Looking for the approval of committee of the whole meeting minutes on July 24th. Anybody have any questions, discussion? Hearing nothing, consent is approved. Moving on to presentations. We're going to skip over and we're going to move presentations over personnel topics.
Thank you. So this evening we have our team, our building review team, our facility study team here to talk about where we're at in the development of our plan. Tom has a presentation up. Kurt and others who are here, if you'd like to come up to the table, we'll begin to go over where we're at. We're also going to talk about the survey that we'll be administering to the community sometime at the end of October. Early October. Want to give you an overview of the questions for that this evening.
Hi, Kurt.
All right. Good evening. Clint is joining us via Zoom as well for his portion of the presentation. Main goal of the presentation is to run through the concept plan, so the survey concept plan. We're gearing up to get the survey put together to send out. So we'll be looking at the facility plan that the survey is based on, and then going through the draft community survey. We'll look at that tonight, walk through it, and then we'll have a chance to look at it again and get more comments at the board meeting on the 28th as well. So again, most of this is review. We took the comments and feedback from last work session that we had, got some additional answers, and made some tweaks, so I'll identify those as we go through. But for the most part, this is review information that we're going through. So again, the base survey plan is new middle school at the 97.3 million, 6th through 8th grade, and the elementary school, focused on bringing 4K into the elementary schools. So middle school would add 6th grade rather than just 7th and 8th, and then 4K into the elementary schools, and then Big Bend has the parking lot improvements to help take care of some of the congestion with the parking lots. Then the potential plan that's included in the survey, and when we get to the survey, we'll see how that lays out in the survey. Is again, that the goal of the survey is to get feedback from the community. The potential plan is high school focus, where the tech ed and the multi-purpose turf facility, building trades class would go into the auto shop would go into the south gym would go into a larger multi-purpose new facility with a weight room. And so that potential plan is a $22.7 million price tag. Doing a review of the middle school, the new middle school, what that looks like in concept form is, again, 6th through 8th grade, about 235,000 to 250,000 square feet is what's been programmed and what the budgets are based on. It would go east of the existing Parkview Middle School, allowing us to build the new middle school while the existing middle school continues to operate as a middle school. The site area is about 37 acres between Parkview, Clarendon, and District Office. All those buildings together, about 37 acres. This last point came from a discussion from our last work session, the cafetorium concept. And when we get a few slides down, we're going to have Clint kind of walk through what that looks like. We evaluated a couple different options, and Clint will walk through how that works and how it would work and feel in the space. This is what the concept plan would be. So again, Bray Architects took a middle school and kind of laid it on our site, and it fit well on the site, a multi-story building. Obviously, this is very concept yet, so as we progress through, there'll be changes to this, but it just shows that a 6th through 8th grade middle school can fit well on the site, and you see the dashed lines here of where the existing middle school is, so obviously that would be removed. New track, and there's a space for a baseball field. The bus drop-off works well with Clarendon and the middle school, so that could flow right through on Highway 83 and out at the Clarendon side, and then keep separation with the staff and visitor parking, and continue to have that's our existing entrance right now to the district office, so that would continue to serve the middle school as well. So that's the concept plan. Elementary school concept plan. So one of the follow-ups from last work session meeting was that we wanted to reach back out to the individual principals at each school and just kind of validate, because we as you know, we went through a progression through the master planning process of going from, a major investment, a $90 to $100 million investment in the elementary schools, and scaled down, and so we wanted to communicate back and make sure we were hitting the priority needs with the limitation of the $5 million investment, and the goal of bringing 4K into the elementary schools and not have to rely on private organizations, the daycare centers, for our 4K, like we have been. A portion of that has been what we have been doing. So I'll go through each school to walk through what in concept that looks like. So Big Bend Elementary, taking the 2 classrooms that were here, that were 2 normal size 800 square foot classrooms and 2 classrooms here, making 2 1,200 square foot 4K classrooms that has direct access to a restroom, a flex room with on either side of there to give out some extra flexibility of conference room space or small group instruction space. Big Bend is the one building that gets site improvements as well to address some of the traffic congestion where cars, as drop off and pickup is occurring, is backing up onto Highway 164. So in order to ease that, rework that parking lot, enlarge the parking lot to provide more drop off pickup space. Clarendon, in this, we are taking an existing 5K classroom that was over here, that was a smaller 5K, didn't have bathrooms, was about 900 square feet, taking the opportunity to enlarge that, so we have 3 5K classrooms that are 1,200 square feet with direct access to a bathroom. And then across the hall, taking and getting our 2 4K classrooms with bathrooms directly off of them. Utilizing underutilized, renovating underutilized space here. This is the old locker rooms, which is used for storage right now, taking that and making that a special ed room. Direct bathrooms, unisex bathrooms right off of the corridor here, and then maintaining some storage in that space. At Prairie View, similar situation as Clarendon, where they had a 5K, so they have 2 normal size, and I say normal 1,200 square foot kindergarten 5K classrooms, and their third 5K classroom was a smaller 800 square foot or so classroom. So taking that 800 square foot classroom, expanding it into what was the intervention area, and making a larger 5K classroom, renovating the public restroom, and making a bathroom that's directly off of the 5K classroom, renovating the existing 4K, 4th grade classrooms into 4K classrooms, adding the individual bathrooms off of each of those. And again, with 6th grade moving out in each of these elementary schools, this is where we get the flexibility to do this. So the 4th grade classroom moves out. And then this room was used for wraparound care and 4K, and it's in a smaller side. So we took a portion of that to add to this 4K classroom, and then the rest of it we're utilizing for intervention in small group instruction room over there. And then the other need that they had was conference room. They had one of the smallest conference rooms of the elementary school, so carving out a little bit of the library and adding a larger conference room in there as well. This is a newer concept up on the 2nd floor, potentially taking our public restroom on the 2nd floor and adding a unisex bathroom off of there and still maintaining that public bathroom on the 2nd floor as well. At Rolling Hills, took 5K classroom. Again, they had 2 5K, 1,200 square foot classrooms. Their third 5K classroom is a little bit smaller, so taking that 5K classroom, expanding, taking a little bit of the speech room that was here, expanding that so we get a good 1,200 square foot 5K classroom. What's left over of the speech classroom, making it a flex classroom, and then doing our 2 4K classrooms with bathrooms right off of the 4K classrooms, and then a flex room as well. Section Elementary, 3 classrooms were here. We'd convert that into 2 4K classrooms with bathrooms right off the 4Ks. The third existing 5K classroom, again, was a smaller classroom, so taking this opportunity to expand that into a 1,200 square foot 5K classroom, adding the bathrooms directly off, and an additional bathroom that would be directly accessible from the corridors itself, a unisex bathroom, and then an SGI down at the bottom. And then similar to Clarendon, where we were taking underutilized space where the locker rooms were, this is existing locker rooms, used primarily for storage. We will convert some of that to special ed, and then the remaining would still remain as storage space for section. Any questions? I'll pause there. Any questions at all so far on the elementary school and middle school? All right. What are the high school concept then? So this is the potential project as it's being asked in the survey. Replacing the south gym with multi-purpose turf facility and weight room. So this south gym that's currently here as turf would go into the larger new construction multi-purpose turf facility and weight room. And then number 2 is move the auto shop that's currently here and move that into the south gym, and then take what's left vacated by the auto shop and expand this existing, right there is the tech ed space, expand across the hall into that old auto shop area for woods and metals area. So I want to just walk through along the way as we talk through master planning over the last year plus, items that have come up in the master plan, but where we're the solutions for them, which are non-referendum related. But so I want to talk through them just because they've come up in discussion and they're notable items. But the suggestions as we go through this is not to make these part of the referendum. And here's the proposed solution that the administration's looking at for solving these items that came up during the master planning process. The first one is high school foods and family and consumer science. So room 124, which is a larger, used to be a study hall room, right now is being used for the 18 to 21-year-old program. That place, we're looking for a new home for 18 to 21-year program. And when that happens, the plan would be to, from operational funds, to build that out or renovate that space to allow for family and consumer ed science to go into that space. The next one is the existing fitness center. So if we build a larger multi-purpose turf facility with a weight room, that fitness center would still be there and utilize it just for the cardio equipment only and keep the weights in the new facility. District-wide capital improvements, that as we talked through the master planning, that was an item we've been carrying along the way. In the last few months, with the new biannual budget that came out, provided us the opportunity to manage those capital improvements internally through operational funds. With the revenue limit increase, looking at that and saying, okay, we can handle those capital improvements through that revenue limit increase plus fund balance that we have. So feeling confident that those capital improvement forecasts can handle it that way. And then the last item is Eagleville. With a space gain from 6th grade vacating, provides them some additional space, and the capital improvements that were planned would just continue to be planned through operational expenses as well. So there was discussion about whether we do trailer or addition, and just looking at where the capital improvement funds, and with 6th grade moving out, we just keep that as a separate discussion for Eagleville. All right, give me a hand going forward if you could. Yep, this is good. Yep, so I'll turn this one over to Clint. Let's test to make sure. Clint, can you hear us and can you communicate with us?
I can hear you guys. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, perfect. So you can take it over with the performance spaces and just kind of walk us through the two options that we looked at for the middle school cafetorium. If you can walk us through, that'd be great.
Perfect. Tom, can you reshare the screen, please? All right, so with some of the feedback from the previous meetings and subsequent conversations, kind of internally within our group, we looked at sort of two different options to consider. Option number one is kind of skipping down to the bottom was the Oshkosh example that we did kind of impromptu present to the board. at one of the previous meetings, but the idea there is it's a cafeteria with an open air platform or stage that can be used for performances or presentations. Again, it's a platform size stage or space. It could be sized however needed to accommodate band or choir students. When not being used for performances, in the examples we'll show, those are typically utilized as additional seating area for the cafeteria. So it's not really a dedicated or designated space for performance. Again, that space could be outfitted with AV and lighting, but it typically would not have curtains or any type of rigging that you'd say in maybe kind of a nicer performance type idea. So again, just a couple of recent examples. I'll show a couple pictures. We looked at Oshkosh previously. JC McKenna is over in Evansville, and then Schulte is a project in Racine. So this is the JC McKenna project. You can see kind of those wood steps to the platform, which in this case, I believe is about 30 by 20, so not very large, but again, could be sized however we need for your situation. And then the stairs going up to the second floor in the background. This again was the Oshkosh example. So you can see the stage in the background there with a video screen. When we looked at this last time, there's kind of one of those learning stair concepts that's kind of to our left and just a bit out of the picture. Again, this space would hold about 400 spectators for the stage. Again, the stage in this case, I believe is about 40 by 20, so it's a little bit bigger than the previous example, but again, maybe not quite as big as what would be needed for a full band type performance. What we saw as option 2, kind of in this situation, would be a cafeteria with a dedicated stage for performances and presentations. The stage would be walled off and really function as its own separate space. It would not be auxiliary seating type space. Again, could be sized however we needed to. As within our group, we were kind of comparing it to the high school stage. That's roughly 35 by 100 feet. But not all of that space for the stage is intended for performances. There's a lot of wing space that exists within that. So again, kind of internally as we were brainstorming, we thought roughly a good size to potentially target would be right around 30 by 70. So just a little bit smaller, but really, again, would represent the true performance space that would be similar to what's at the high school. Our other thought is maybe this stage could be used as an additional classroom space when not in use for a performance. I do have an example I'll show in a little bit and tell a bit of a story for that. And I think, again, a positive trade-off that we could consider. Again, we would include AV lighting, and in this case, the stage could probably have a little bit more of a dedicated rigging and or curtain example. So again, a number of schools listed below, so we'll look at some pictures here in a second. This is over in Sparta. I just happen to be working in this district right now. So this is a middle school. They have a 3-tiered concept for seating, and then as you see, a dedicated stage space in the background. This is Carl Traeger, a very similar situation. You can see in this case, they do have an operable wall that exists for their stage. So again, this would kind of leads to that example of when it's not being used as a stage, we could potentially put that operable wall in place, and it could be a band rehearsal space or an additional space that could be utilized. Also, the benefit of that is when it is being used in performance mode, you could have things set up and the students would not have access to it, and we could keep things safe and out of harm's way. This was an example that our friends at Cullen provided for Randolph. So again, a very similar concept with the dedicated stage and the cafeteria just off that. And then finally, this is one, again, we thought might meld some of the different ideas together really well. This is Sheboygan Falls Middle School. So this has the nice dedicated stage. This has, again, that cafeteria commons type space. And then in the foreground, you can see the learning stair, which again kind of doubles as tiered seating. So we think this kind of creates a nice environment to mimic an auditorium type feel, but the flexibility that it is cafeteria type space. In this particular case, they did not have the operable wall. But again, I think that could very easily be implemented here and create that environment. So again, at this time, we think a very good solution would be to go with that option 2 and really kind of mimic the look and feel of that Sheboygan Falls project with a dedicated stage with that operable wall to be utilized for future flexibility and also just keeping the performance space secure from wandering students throughout the day or within the uses. Again, the acoustics, we can work with our acoustical engineers to make sure the space works well, both for performances and as a day-to-day cafeteria. And again, we believe the way that the space is aligned right now for the cafeteria space will be able to support 400 plus people for performances.
Great, thank you, Clint. One of the questions that Dr. Cook had asked me, and I believe my response was accurate, but I wanted to double check with you, Clint, and I think you researched it as well, was there was discussion about doing a full auditorium at a middle school level, and the question was, for our Classic 8 conference, is there any middle schools that have a full auditorium? I didn't believe there was. Clint, did you verify that at all?
Yeah, I talked to Matt. We've done work in Waukesha, and maybe Joe would even have, given that he's been there. Matt's recollection is that possibly 2 of the middle schools in Waukesha have auditoriums, but I believe both of those middle schools are fairly old, are older in nature. We kind of looked back through our backlog, and probably within the last 15, even going back 20 years, we have not done auditoriums at the middle school level, and again, in touring a lot of them across the state, we're not seeing them. Where we have seen them, it is in older buildings or in instances where the old high school became the middle school. So I would say it's atypical for them to have auditoriums.
The two auditoriums, I would liken them more to large group instruction spaces versus the traditional auditorium like we'd think of one. They were small seating capacity, a very small stage, and the lighting and such was very, very dated. So they were not maybe 200 seat capacity and very small in nature.
Any questions on that concept that Clint walked through with the cafetorium?
I had a question about the previous stuff.
Go ahead.
Is it possible for us to set up, you had talked about making the old gym the auto shop and then the old auto shop a tech room? Is it possible for us to be able to like tour that, see what's going on there? In my head, it makes more sense to have the gym the tech room because there's like all kinds of different trades that we could do, and autos is just autos. It's one thing. So I'd like to be able to see if that makes sense for us to be making that move instead of maybe dedicating that space to electrical, plumbing, all the different trades that there are. I feel like they'd probably take up more space potentially.
Yeah, yes, we can certainly walk through. I think the key point at this point in time is when we look at like and this was when we went and validated with the elementary school principals, and this concept or discussion came up is our key point right now with where we're at is as long as the square footage is at the level we're at concept discussion, whether this becomes auto shop or tech ed, as long as we're capturing the square footage, that's the important piece because the dollars follow the square footage for the most part, right? I mean, JP Cullen does put a little bit more, beyond that based on the type of square footage, but as long as we're covering the amount square footage is accurate, then we're comfortable with moving forward, and we can have those discussions as we get feedback that from the community of, do they support this plan, right? If your question was, you know, can we take a larger section over here and do additional square footage beyond that, I'd say, well, let's before we go any further, let's vet that, because once we go out to survey with dollar amounts, we don't want to be changing, drastically changing, if that makes sense. So to your question is, yes, if there's a better, and a good example actually is when we did the 2016 referendum, we initially had the gym in 2000, all the way through referendum time. We were thinking that the gym made sense to go right here. And then as we got into design, it was no, for a number of different reasons, the gym made more sense there, and it was the right call. But the key piece is that we had the right amount of square footage and dollars in, that we were able to make that change as design progressed. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So Vito, if I understand what you're proposing there is to leave.
You got the bad mic.
Real loud. Sorry about
No, it's
that.
not on.
So number 3 would stay as autos, and number 2 would become building trades. Is that what you're suggesting? Did I hear you right?
I'd just like to make sure that moving autos is the right move.
So,
I mean,
yeah,
go ahead. Just in my head, it makes sense that all the tech things would take up more space than autos would. So if I can see it and they have cars piled on top of each other and they're just packed to the gills, then all right, makes sense. If not, then I just remember my gym class or my tech ed classes, and we were all, it was an entire floor of a high school.
Sure. So I know in the area that's labeled number 3 right now, doubles is autos and small engines. So when small engines is, if Dustin Lehman was here, he would give a better description of it. But the small engines class, they have to raise the autos to get them out of the way, and then they pull out the small engine parts. And with the way that course really isn't meant to like pull out the engines, pull out the tools, pull out the pieces. Okay, class is done, put it all back. You really need like a solid footprint, so you're not wasting all the time of shuffling your materials in and out, your parts in and out. So number 3 is really doubled up for 2 things that really need a dedicated space. So don't want to speak for Dustin, but that's my recollection of moving the autos from 3 to 2. So you could have autos with ample room and then small engines to be there as well. So that's what I recall.
And I think the amount of square footage is that in that south gym, I don't expect it's going to be 100% autos. I think there's, going back to that comment of, as long as we are capturing the square footage and the dollars, you know, these 2 squares up top here, that could be, maybe that's a robotics classroom. That's details that as we go through the programming design, that stuff will get massaged in there. Good. Any other questions? All right, excellent. Then the next section is, I just want to walk through the draft survey. Tom, do you have the actual survey that you can bring up? Excellent. So school perceptions, the district hired a third party, Bill Foster, with school perceptions to go through and create a survey, a community survey. Really the purpose of this survey is twofold. One is it's the vehicle that the board will use to say, here's what we've been working on, here's all the thought and the process and the recommended plan, and share that with the community, and then provide that opportunity for the community then through a survey district-wide to provide feedback to guide the board then of what's the direction. Is it, no, they're not interested in doing any type of referendum, or is it they're interested in doing the base plan only, or the base plan and the potential high school plan as well. And so with that information that comes back, school perceptions will help interpret that information when we get the survey back, and then give the district that information to guide on that next step, with the goal of sometime in December making that final decision of are we proceeding, and if we are, what's the plan look like. So I'm going to walk through, I believe you guys received this in your packet, so you can go through it in more detail, word by word. I'll just kind of walk through the concepts of this survey itself. So the first page, you can go up to that first page. The first page is really the opening letter that's written from you as the board.
You want me to go back up to that?
Yeah, go up to that. Yep, yeah, fine. Really, that first paragraph talks about we have the high-performing test scores, high-performing academics in light of the lower spending districts in our county and our state. So it highlights that. It talks about the community engagement and the community focus group meetings that we did over the spring. And then really the outcome of that was the primary linchpin of this project is Parkview Middle School. The middle school is the center point, was the takeaway that we got from the focus groups and our planning. And so it reads, before we go any further, we need to understand the priorities of our taxpayers to this community-wide survey. So the letter is basically written and gives a little background and asking for that feedback to give us guidance to proceed. If you scroll down just a little bit, the gray box where it says take this survey in two ways. So every taxpayer, every person in the community will get a paper format survey. Again, one is to get feedback from them, and the second piece, which is very valuable as well, is to educate them on what we've been talking about, what the plan is. Most people in our community have no idea that we're talking about this, right? And when you think about the larger community, I mean, there's a sliver of the community know, but this is a way of educating and bringing everybody up to speed as far as what's being discussed. So they will have the opportunity to, when they get the paper format, they'll have the opportunity to go to that website to fill the survey out. School Perceptions has a unique code on each individual survey, so somebody can't, Craig, you can't keep entering the same survey over and over on the project. So
You know how to do that square thing. I have no idea.
well, you can type the website in as well. All right. So one option is doing it electronically, and the other option is they can fill out the paper format and either mail it in or drop it at the district office. So that's the way people will respond to the survey. Okay, you can go to the next page. So the first section then is background information, really going all the way back to the planning that started back in 2014 when we started talking about the high school project. It walks us through and talks through, that was our first phase, and now we're building on the success of the high school project that was done in 2016 was that referendum passed, and now we're in phase 2 of looking at the middle school as the focus of this next project, along with the 4K kindergarten, bringing 4K in, not having to rely on private organizations for 4K needs. And then it looks into the future as well of, okay, once we take care of the middle school, then we're left with the elementary schools at some point in the future. By that, when we get to that point, we've hit everything in the district, the priority needs of the district. You can scroll down. This next section talks about project financing, so it highlights the excellent, responsible paying off debt ahead of time and what that meant. So to be on track to be debt-free with our most recent project that was done at the high school, I think is awesome. We are on track to be, in 2027, we're on track to be debt-free. So it highlights that, shows the $2.6 million of interest savings because we accelerated our interest and debt repayment. The next section then goes into facility challenges. So it first talks about Parkview and just highlights from the facility study that was done, highlights and walks through the different challenges of Parkview between the mechanical systems, the student drop-off pickup, classroom, just the room sizes being smaller than what you would typically see, like the 900 square foot is where you like to be. They're closer to the 700 square foot. So it walks through those challenges for Parkview, and then walks through the challenges for 4K at the elementary schools. So it talks about elementary school and the desire to get 4K into the schools, and by doing that, just because sixth grade classes are moving out, you can't plug them into a sixth grade classroom, or ideally you're not plugging them into a sixth grade classroom because sixth grade is typically, 800 to 900 square feet, and ideally a 4K classroom is about 1,200 square feet with a bathroom attached. So it talks about the elementary school challenges as well. So this is the first point of the survey that we're asking for feedback, and it's, would you support the district pursuing a referendum to fund the next phase of the facility plan? So it's really our permission slip to say, do you support the board pursuing a referendum? So just a yes or no answer, or I'm not sure, and it provides an opportunity for comments, questions. Then the next part of the survey gets into the plan of Parkview Middle School and the 4K. So it walks through a bullet point of what we started off with looking at renovating Parkview Middle School. And it kind of gives you a bullet point of some of those factors that led us to saying, well, rather than doing a renovation of Parkview, let's look at doing a new middle school. So first bullet point was a renovation was $85 million, which was 88% of building a new middle school. Because of the existing structure, it was difficult to renovate, to get the ideal spaces with load-bearing walls and the existing layout. And then just the disruption to school versus building brand new, not disrupting the school, and having construction in the school during renovations. That was a factor as well. And then traffic congestion as well was listed as a reason why we're looking at new versus renovated. Then the next, where it says proposed plan, it talks about what that new middle school would be. Again, 6th through 8th grade rather than 7th through 8th, 1,200 students, 3-court gym, energy efficient improvements, natural lighting. Basically, when you're building new, it provides the opportunity to do it with a fresh, do it the way you ideally want to do it versus being constrained to an existing footprint of a building. So then into the elementary schools, it highlights to bring 4K in, and then reconfiguring Big Bend Elementary traffic flow by adding a parking lot in. So those two factors between the $5 million elementary school and a $97.3 million Parkview replacement for a total of $102.3 million. And then it talks about tax impact. Tom is finalizing these numbers, but right now we're somewhere around 75 cents per 75 cents per $75 per $100,000 of property value. And so this is the second question then. We're asking for feedback. Would you support a $102.3 million referendum to fund the recommended plan? So we walked through the recommended plan and we shared the tax impact, and there's the choices between definitely yes or definitely no or somewhere in between. It allows people to share their opinion on that. There's also a spot where they can add comments that allows us to dissect that a little bit further.
Kurt, why so many choices?
What's that?
Why so many choices?
It is because at this point people people don't have a definite yes or a definite no. So when Bill from School Perceptions will analyze that, he'll look at his historical of how past surveys have went, and he'll take a percentage of the probably yes, and when he dissects that for you to make a decision, he'll take a percentage of that probably yes and say, okay, historically speaking on these surveys, this percentage goes into the yes category and this percentage goes into the no category. So it kind of gives you an idea of where people are feeling.
That's a good answer. Okay.
All right, then next section is the potential high school project. So that is the tech ed portion. So it goes and highlights the driver for the tech ed. So the 2016 project had tech ed investment in it, and as a result of that, and in spite of that, it has continued to grow, or not. That area has just been an area that's continued to grow, and I think it's a big part has been what we did in 2016. It puts some facts from last year as far as a number of class requests and a number of people that got denied. So 75% of the courses that were requested were honored, meaning 25% in the tech ed area did not get accepted because of the space constraints, which is a good problem to have. So that's the driver of the high school piece. And the second driver is the multi-purpose facility, just having additional space for athletics, for phy-ed, for band. So they work well together because the tech ed area would move into the south gym, and to replace that south gym area would be the larger multi-purpose turf facility. So it walks through that and shows that concept. And then it has a similar question that isolates just that portion of the high school project, saying, would you support expanding the plan by $22.7 million to fund the high school project as described above? And then it'll give the tax impact increase, and then give the same options again for that. And then the rest of the survey then is just generic information that's good for the district to know. This is similar questions that school perceptions use on every survey. Valuable information of, how is the district doing as far as from the educational level, keeping the public informed, being responsible with money, and pride in the community, and so you get responses from there. And would you recommend Mukwonago schools to a family or a friend? And then there's demographic information, which is very valuable there. So age, we ask if they are parents or staff member. And you'll hear when Bill Foster gives us the results, the largest group of our community, about 75% of our community is what's typical, is non-parent and non-staff. So that group of people is going to be the ones that we focus most on, because they most often will be, because they're the largest group, we need to be listening to what they're saying, right? You'll most likely will see parents and staff. They will be more supportive of investing in schools. It's the non-parent, non-staff are the ones that we want to be paying attention to. So he'll segregate that data when he analyzes it and shares with you. And this is how we get that information is if you scroll down a little bit, that's one of the questions as far as are you an employee of Mukwonago School District, and do you have children in the school district? Then we ask, where do you get your information from? What's your preferred way of getting information? Whether it's newspaper, text, email, Facebook. And then the last page is just a graph of just showing the tax mill rates. And so that's being finalized yet, as well as that exact graphic. But that's the survey. Any questions on the survey?
The demographic part at the end, are those optional fields, or are those required to complete the survey?
I believe they are optional. Okay. I believe they are optional. Clint, can you confirm that?
Kurt, I believe to complete the survey, you could not answer any of the questions on the survey. It'll still record the data.
Thank you.
So the plan then is we will, go ahead, did you?
So it's on there, did it tell the taxpayers how much the impact on their taxes would be?
We're working on that right now, Jerry, to finalize that and make it as current as possible.
Will it tell about both?
Yeah.
So that if one is and how much more the second one would be, will it be separated out?
Yes. So the base plan will have its impact on mill rate. And then the second question at the high school will add an additional amount to that.
We'll go ahead and just suggest that we give the explanation as to why it's going to be, math isn't going to add up on that, because there's going to be somebody
So
doing
when we
a lot of questions.
explain this graph here, Vito, we will this graph will be designed to explain that very thing.
Save yourself a lot of headaches.
Good, so the plan is then to put this in final format. It'll be in your packet for the 28th, the board meeting. And if the board is acceptable to that final draft, then we would go out to community in the following weeks to get it out to community, and then get that feedback. And then once we get the feedback, come back to the board to share the results of that, and then ultimately working towards that December timeframe to, if the board so chooses, to make a resolution to proceed with it. So I think, you know, that survey really is the tool, and you've heard us say it before, right? Trust the survey as that feedback comes in. Trust it, and historically, boards that follow the results of that survey have been very successful. So expect to see something here probably, I'm guessing either October, November timeframe, as I'd expect that school perceptions would have that data put together and brought back to the board.
I have a couple questions, but I don't know if this is the time to ask them. Are we having further discussion on this afterwards, or is this the time to discuss?
You can ask questions now while he's here, and then in the next meeting, we're going to have discussions on if we're going to pass it.
Okay, so I have done a little research, and in the conversations, many times it was discussed that you have talked to the elementary administration as to what they need for their 4K. And I actually, when looking at what was developed for the 4K, it's different than it was, and it's much improved from, in my opinion, from where you've placed the classrooms. But there's never been discussion on speaking with the middle school administration as to what they felt for the layout and the design of a middle school would be. I do say that the option 2 with the walled off auditorium or all walled off performance area is a considerable improvement from the little stage that was there before. However, I wonder if we know how many attendees come to any given elementary concert. And I do know that, and with something like this, with this cafetorium thing, every time there's a concert, the seating has to be set up. Not so much with the number 2, because they've got the platform in the back, the whatever you want to call them. They look like risers or whatever back there, so if there would be some view, you know, so you're not flat on the floor. And then the next, so that was one thing, because 400 sounds like, oh, it fits 400, but I believe there's probably more than 400 that come. I'm not sure about that number. That's another number I was wondering about. So that was one thing. The next thing is, you've always said, you know, like you've said to Vito, when we go and we ask for the money, because I know one of the answers that I get back when I ask about conversations on what it was going to look like, it's like, well, after we get this passed, then we'll do all that detail work later. Well, if we haven't gotten enough money, those conversations are limited, which we know from the high school that we had to change different things. So I was wondering if we need to look at that so that we for sure have enough money in there for what we need for, here was the term, let's see, what was the term called? Will a cafetorium provide an educationally sound environment? So I don't know if that we've discussed it with people who know what it would entail, because if we build this lovely cafetorium and it doesn't provide what is needed for the programming and for the curriculum, then we're spending the money instead of an auditorium. Not that we should do an auditorium, I'm not saying that, but if we spend it, maybe, and then it doesn't get used, if that doesn't suffice. No. So I don't know that we've done enough research in that area just so that when we go forward, we've put in enough for what we might need or what might look different by getting input from people that would know more about that than anybody here in this room.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So it is a balance of, at this stage, how much do we spend on design as far as getting the details of that figured out versus right now the way we went about it and the way all referendums go about it is you look at historical costs. That's what JP Cullen, we bring that partner on of what have they built past middle schools for on a dollars per square foot, a cafeteria type area, a classroom type area. And we use that historical cost with the idea of if past projects have been built for that dollar amount, plus we add the inflation factor as well, we use that as our 97.3. That's where we come up with that dollar amount is that picture you put up there, that we put up on that slide, there's not anything more than that picture. There's not detail behind it. It's more spreadsheet based. So it's looking at square footage numbers. And so with Bray as our architects and JP Cullen as our professional cost estimators, confident that we can build. It was 235,000 square feet to 250,000 square feet. So we have a range of square footage that the number is based off of. And so when we go forward with it, and if the direction is to proceed, then it's getting to the level of the detail of what's in that square footage. So using past projects to help us forecast future cost, and then without spending a ton of time on design and dollars on design on something that may not be supported by the community. So we want to forecast those costs, make sure the community is on board with it, and then after the question passed, we get into the detailed design behind it, and then those detailed discussions with the middle school principals. We had a fair amount of discussion with the middle school principals when we were talking about renovating the middle school because you kind of have some constraints in there, right? And when you go to new construction, it's you have a lot of options there. So we're comfortable that the dollars are going to be covered. Even like when we looked at the cafetorium concept, that number didn't change because we were comfortable that the square footage is there yet, as far as that range of square footage. Does that make sense?
Kurt, I would just add that we've talked a little bit about this relative to the elementaries, that we sort of looked at what those maybe would be as a new elementary and then kind of reverse engineer of that master plan concept. I mean, we really did the same thing for the middle schools. We sort of almost started with, okay, if we were to build a new middle school, it would have all of these spaces, how many science spaces, how many tech ed, all of those things. So to Kurt's point of a spreadsheet architecture, there's kind of that list of all of those things. And then we, again, as he said, we did reverse engineer that concept to try to come up with what we would need to do to the existing. And then we also have that now as our square footage target for what we would build for a new building.
Is that answering? You don't look satisfied with that answer.
Well, it's just that if in my brain, if we're going to do this, some years ago we brought our high school up to what it is now. We couldn't do everything we wanted to do. We really, when we went to survey, we wanted to put an indoor track, and the community wouldn't support an indoor track. So we had to back off. So if a 400-seat cafetorium isn't going to service what we need for a second performance area, do we need to see if the community wants something more than that so that it would suffice? I don't know how else to say it. Maybe it wouldn't, but maybe it's like option 3 or something like, I don't, because if this isn't going to be, or if this is wonderful and everybody's happy with it, great.
You're wondering if Mukwonago Middle School, Parkview Middle School, new construction, if has greater needs than what other past middle schools have had needed. And if so, and so when we started talking, when the discussion started coming up about a brand, like a auditorium similar to the high school, yeah, that type of example, we couldn't do that for the square footage that we had. That was the $10 million additional, right, to do that. Provided that we stay within that program of those square footage, we're confident we can get the project done at the 97.3. But if along the way it's a comment came up or a desire came up and said, rather than a 400-seat cafeteria, we want to have an 800 or 1,000-seat cafeteria, which would be unexpected because that's not what a typical 6th through 8th grade cafeteria would be. Yes, that would become a budget challenge where we'd have to, if we added that, we'd have to take away from somewhere else. The great thing about the cafetorium is you're utilizing a space that is used for a cafeteria, and that stage area can be used for a speaker that comes in, for assemblies that come in, or for that concert that happens. So it's taking those spaces and having several uses for it rather than dedicating a space that gets limited use. And given that we have the great facility at the high school, that why duplicate something like that?
Well, there's one. Here's a comment. Last year, when they're going to put concerts in the PAC, okay, because when we went through the community, all the community focus groups, okay, I came to most of them, but there was never anyone from that PAC or the fine arts area that came in to explain to those people who were there listening the finite space in that PAC. There are outside groups that can't use it because there's not time. And when they go for the schools in the fall, when they set up their concerts, last year there was a suggestion that we have a concert 2 days before Christmas because there's no more for an elementary school. So that's where this educationally sound thing comes in. With the PAC, yes, we've got that lovely thing, but it's full all the time, and we are turning people away. Like in your example up there, where for the tech ed, we're turning 186 people away. Well, we are not providing space for everyone who needs it in our community right now with the PAC, even though it's wonderful. So our lovely West Gym and our lovely it is, but we just aren't. So here we have this opportunity, which again, Vito had said one time in the past that, well, let's know what we need and then let's sell it well, and maybe the people would pay the money for it. You know what I'm saying? And so they're not even being given the opportunity to do that because I don't believe that there's been enough study done. That's why I say, how many people come to an elementary concert? Is it 600? Is it 400? Is it 200? I don't know. So that is, I just think that we haven't done our due diligence in that area. It's a beautiful building. I'm not trying to knock it. I just think if we're going to do it, now is our chance to do it, because now it's phase 2.
Yeah, I think that's an easy enough number to validate prior to next meeting, right? Of how many people come into the elementary school, and maybe we're already adequately sized or not. So we will come back with that information, talking to the elementary school principals on the average attendance or maximum attendance for elementary school concerts, and then see how that fits in the program that we have right now with what would be built for a cafeteria middle school. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Going back to the survey, how many of these go out, and do we have an anticipated response rate?
That's a great question. Clint will probably have that number better than I do. I used to know it, but Clint, do you know what a typical response? I know the Mukwonago one back in 2016 had a very good response rate. Once you hit a certain percentage, and I forget what that is as well, the numbers don't change much. But Clint, can you talk to that question a little bit?
Yep, happy to speak to that. What Bill's probably going to say is right now they're anywhere between 15 and 20% response rate. When COVID started, people had nothing to do. They actually saw some up in the 30s as far as a response rate. What they will tell you is 400 is kind of the magic number. So once you kind of get a sample size of people of about 400 people, the numbers really don't change. They've kind of actually looked at that and tested that with a number of their different surveys, and again, kind of just the mathematical sample size. Anything above 400, it just sharpens their margin of error numbers for it. So that's kind of the magic number. Obviously, we want to get a great turnout, but I would say probably to expect to be somewhere in that 18 to 20% range.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move on to personnel topics, director's report.
Thank you. Stephen gave us a brief report tonight just to go over so that the board is aware of where we've been at with hiring. We currently have the Performing Arts Center position in the works and a high school tech ed teacher, as well as a social work position. We've interviewed and hired 30 new staff members across the district. That's professional staff and support staff over the course of the summer. And we still think we're pretty well positioned going into the school year. So we have a number of searches that are active, ongoing, and interviews are happening right around the time we're speaking tonight. We do have a job fair coming up on the 15th for support staff positions from 3 to 7 p.m. At the district office. We'll be looking for positions in buildings and grounds, food service, and then our aid positions at the elementary and secondary level. So to anybody who's listening tonight who's interested in a position, please come and see us next week.
How many openings do we have?
Tomorrow. Oh, sorry, tomorrow. My weeks are getting confused. Thank you. Yes, tomorrow, the 15th. I apologize. Right now, we have, there were 5 positions on weekend, professional positions that were open. One of those positions is in the process of being filled as we speak. One of them was for a long-term substitute teacher. So as far as full-time staff goes, we have 3 that are out there at the moment. Aid positions, I don't have an exact count of that between our buildings and grounds crew and our teaching assistants. So.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to student learning.
Good evening. We are going to start out today. Michelle's going to speak to you about our K-6 curriculum process. We will be looking for approval for this at the board meeting in August, but Michelle will talk to you a little bit about it. I'm going to get up and move some slides around for you to see some of the documents and then answer any questions that you might have tonight.
Could you click on the next tab? Okay. So this summer, the school board approved the resource that we use for K-6 social studies, and so then teams of teachers came together and we looked at the social studies standards for the state of Wisconsin, and we pulled focus standards. And then using the resource, we went through chapter by chapter and we looked at, well, what are the focus standards, the things that we want kids to know and be able to do at the end of each chapter. And so the documents that are attached to the memo are the pacing guides that show a year at a glance. So basically, chapter by chapter, I have a second grade example up there. We have the focus standards for each chapter, and then in kid-friendly language, we have the ICANN learning targets. And then next to that is the big overarching question of that chapter. And so the important thing is we want kids asking questions. We want them learning how to do research to answer questions. And so that compelling question is the overarching question of the chapter. And then at the end, there's a summative, either an inquiry project or an assessment that students take. In grades 3 through 6, we alternate between inquiry projects and assessments, and then in K2, we do mostly inquiry projects because that's a little bit more appropriate for their age groups. So that's that document that's up there. And then I wanted you to see a little bit more drilled down what the teachers get to see. This was not attached to the memo, basically because we have things that are linked, such as answer keys, assessments, things like that, that we don't want floating around in the public. But I did want you to see what the teachers also get. And so this is very specific to chapter 2, so that overarching compelling question is up there, and then each of our groups went through and made sure that the answers are readily available so that all teachers know these are the proficient responses we're expecting students to be able to come up with. And then as you scroll down, we have our focus standards listed for each unit along with the ICANN statements. And then the inquiry standards are also put through there. So basically throughout all of our units, we want the kids asking questions and learning how to do research to answer questions. So that's what the inquiry standards showcase. And then if you keep scrolling, we get down to the actual lesson levels. We have the highlighted vocabulary, the highlighted people that the students will be learning about, and then at the bottom of the document is the curriculum map. And so this is what teachers see. Basically, lesson by lesson, we have, because the resource is so huge and we can't possibly teach everything, we went through the resource and we pulled out the pages and the inquiry journal pages, the magazine pages. The research companion is the textbook, technically. And we're trying to teach the kids that the research companion is where you do your research. The inquiry journal asks the question, it's where you put all of your responses, and that textbook is where you find your research. And so the teachers know that these are the things that they must teach. And then in the next column, it's the I can statements. So what's really nice about it is that every single lesson that is on there is linked directly back to standards and I can statements and learning targets. And so the teachers did a really nice job working with me this summer. And then we looked at pacing things out. So that pacing guide also gives recommendations for how long would one lesson take. So just because it's a lesson doesn't necessarily mean it takes one day. One lesson might take 3 or 4 days because of how much content is in that lesson. So we paced that out for the teachers as well. So I do have those really drilled down chapter plans. If anyone was interested and wanted to sit down with me, I'm more than happy to go through those with you. It's just a little trickier to link them out there publicly. So I wanted to provide you with the chance to ask me any questions if you had any prior to voting in the next couple of weeks.
Good.
And then I wanted to update you on just 3 things I think I've got memos for in there, things that you might be hearing about, and to offer an opportunity to ask any questions if you have questions about some of the things that you've been reading in the weekly updates too. So the first one is the state recently passed a literacy bill. Wisconsin Act 20 is what it's called. You may have read about it in the news. And it is a sweeping piece of legislation regarding literacy practices and how we should be teaching literacy in early grades. We are starting to break this down as a district and really start to look at, there's going to be a couple years given before everything needs to be in place regarding this bill, but we have started to break it down and take a look at it. I guess my main message for you tonight is that we feel like we're in a really good place as a district. If you watch the video that we created this spring as a district, really we started answering some of that before knowing that this bill was going to happen in its entirety, but we feel like we're in a pretty good place. A couple things that I would highlight for the board is that we already feel like we have a summer remedial program in place. We may need to add a few aspects to that for 3rd grade, since that's specifically the grade level that's mentioned in the bill. But we feel like a lot of our summer school program already addresses those. They do talk about it being mandatory, so we'll have to add a little bit more communication with parents if we really want students to attend that, although we do reach out to parents as it is right now. We already do 3 required screeners a year in K3, but there's going to need to be more parent communication around those screeners if we're seeing that students are not showing proficiency, just a little bit of a different communication, so we are looking at that already potentially for this year. The biggest thing in the plan is that there are going to need to be personalized reading plans for students not showing proficiency at an early age, and so we're starting to research what that might look like, what we currently do in comparison to what we would need to go, but we do have time to build those and we want to build them right. So that's something that we know we're going to have to do as part of the plan. Already talked about the increased parent communication. The state is stepping in and saying that we no longer can use a 3 queuing system to teach reading. That's not something we're concerned about in our district because our resource Super Kids has never done that. It is based on the science of reading. 3 queuing system is basically when students are taught to look at pictures around to guess at a word, or they're taught to look at the first letter of the word, recognize that, and then guess at what the word might be, given contextual clues or knowing what the rest of the sentence is. That was at one point thought to be a good practice in teaching reading, and through more research, it's been found that that actually is not teaching kids to be readers, it's teaching them to be guessers. That's not something that we do currently in our district though, And so that is not a concern of ours. And then finally, the bill talks about teacher education for training, both at the college level and at the district level. As you remember, our teachers all did letters training, and the #1 teacher training program that's mentioned by the state in the document is actually letters training. So we are ahead of the game there also through the use of ESSER funds. So those are some of the big things mentioned. We feel like we'll be in good shape, and we'll definitely give updates to the board as we start to put those pieces in place. Any questions?
Carol?
Are those personal reading plans going to be considered an IEP?
No.
Yep. So there'd be no funding or anything for following up with and keeping that moving? Or?
Well, there's all sorts of funding connected to this bill that we don't have a lot of detail on yet. And so what exactly will get help and funding or not? There are things like literacy coaches that are mentioned. Our district already has full-time literacy coaches, but that's going to be, it looks like, for like the lowest 20% of districts in their reading scores. But there are some funds connected with getting resources and things. We just have to find more out about that as we go. But it's not an IEP. It is a separate plan for students that are starting to show dips in proficiency, and how we're hopefully reaching those students and thorough communication with parents way before it would get to an IEP.
Okay.
Are there any literacy coaches that were connected to ESSER funds?
No. We did bring in, if you remember, an interventionist to each of our buildings connected to those, but we really feel like by the end of this year, they followed the data, that we've made a lot of the gains that we needed to through COVID. And so, no, our full-time instructional coaches are all funded through district funds already.
Perfect.
It's a great question.
Thank you.
I just wanted to give you guys props for you and your team for being on top of this and setting our kids up for success. I think that's really awesome that we're not behind the ball.
Thank you. There's a lot of voices that have helped in that, but yeah, we do feel good about where we're at, so thanks.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, next thing I just wanted to give you an update on. So I've mentioned professional learning communities, or PLCs, a bit in board updates, and just wanted to make sure briefly that the board knew what that was as we are headed there this year. I do not believe that this, as a district, I do not believe that this is what I would consider to be an initiative, but simply how we're asking our teachers to collaborate when they're together. So professional learning communities have been around for quite some time. We spent about a year as an administrative team studying this process and making sure that we felt that it was a good direction for us to travel on as a district. This summer, I mentioned in one of the updates that we took a team of teachers to Madison. We were lucky enough that Solution Tree, which does the best learning and education around professional learning communities, they had a conference in Madison. So our instructional coaches and administrators went to a conference in Madison, and we've been working with a consultant from Solution Tree too. And so basically what this means when we say that we're going to be on a path to ask our teachers when they're collaborating to be in professional learning communities would be that PLCs are based on 3 big ideas. And that would be learning, that we concentrate on the learning of students by looking at the results and doing so in collaboration. I mean, very, very simple, that's what it boils down to. So when our teachers are collaborating, they're looking at data done by not only district assessments, statewide assessments, but also most importantly assessments that we're building to judge the learning, that they're looking at those results, they're figuring out students that are learning or not learning, taking that back, making sure students are learning through the process, and that teams are working collaboratively. So we don't have English 9 teachers going to classrooms in silos and doing teaching alone and not having discussions about who's doing the learning and who's not. So again, learning results collaboration. And then it's also built on 4 basic questions that we're going to be doing in service and asking the teachers to engage in when they're in collaboration. And that is, what is it that students should know and be able to do? In other words, that guaranteed and viable curriculum that we've talked about. The second question is, how do we know if students are learning it? So looking at the data and taking a look at how we're collecting that. Third question is, what are we doing if the students don't know it? And then the fourth question is, what are we doing if the students already know it? And so that we'll be spending our time in collaborative groups around those 4 questions. And we do believe that by the adults in our system engaging around this process, that it will lead to higher student achievement across the district. So just wanted to make sure that we were norming on what that meant as we were giving updates on that. Questions at all about that? Okay. Last thing then is just people are coming back very, very soon. So August 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st, we will be engaging in professional development in the district. The 28th, 30th, and 31st, teachers will be in buildings working on things like introduction of building goals that have been built with teacher teams during the year, talking about the professional learning communities and the 3 big ideas and the 4 questions with that, and working on some curriculum work in pockets during that time. And then on the 29th, Joe will be kicking it off. Joe's going to do a superintendent greeting with our staff, and then we'll be at the high school that entire day with different groups partaking in learning that they need to there.
Staff football game?
What was that?
Staff football game?
Football game? Workman's comp.
I just want to say how impressed I am with seeing everybody working over the summer. The old stigma of teachers and staff don't work over the summer. Nothing can be further from the truth. God
Nothing
bless
could
you
be
guys.
further from the truth in this district, and kudos to our teachers. I mean, they really do come in. It's a great time. It's a pleasure to work with our teachers in the summer. People come in good moods and really digging in. We will provide some specifics about that in September, but thanks to Michelle, who literally has been with teacher teams at the elementary level all summer long, and lots of really good work at the secondary level too. So we are blessed to have an incredibly dedicated teaching staff.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing from student service topics. Moving on to policy.
Yeah, Christine is coming up. We'll ask Jim to come up as well. This summer, the high school administration, under Christine's guidance, and middle school administration began to look at student discipline across the district. Earlier in the summer, you heard about the AODA presentation and how many instances of vaping, for instance, that we had in our schools. So, and Holly is here as well, thank you. So they were seeking some guidance as to, like, from a policy perspective, what could help us sort through and deal with these disciplinary infractions on a day-to-day basis. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christine as they present to you what they came up with.
Yes, so at the start of the summertime and really at the end of the school year, we wanted to come around as a middle school and a high school team just to norm our conversations about what was happening between the 2 buildings and have some just some norming conversations about how we were handling different disciplinary consequences or incidents in the buildings. And so we worked together as a team, and then we also met with Dr. Cook. He brought along a policy that they had used in Waukesha, and so we were able to work through this policy 5600 that you guys all have a copy of in your board report. And in that policy, it really looks at levels 1, 2, and 3 and scripts out what those different behaviors are and then what those following consequences would be for each of those behaviors. And so we feel like this would be a good next step for the buildings, for our administration, to make it very clear, both for our students, our parents, and our community, as well as our staff, what would be the next steps or what would be the consequence if a student decides to engage in a particular behavior, and what that would look like. So I know that we will, and Joe and I have talked about this, about doing some additional learning as a board around like different procedures around like pre-expulsion and some of those heavier topics, and we'll get into that at another time. But I do want to just point out that anytime we have behaviors in our buildings, we do have, yes, we have behavior, but we also have support. So I just want to point that out too. So if a student is in violation of something, we also have our social workers and our counselors and our school psychs that are also there to help students with a restorative perspective as well. So this always sounds like, when you're talking about discipline and misconduct, it always feels, because it is negative, very negative, but know that also we have that restorative piece that we're always trying to make an opportunity for students to take a negative situation and turn it into an opportunity to learn. So, did you guys want to add anything? Sorry. It's kind of.
Couldn't have said it better.
Did you guys have any questions about the policy?
It's laid out pretty well here, there's no doubt.
I like that it's all laid out and everybody's gonna be on the same page between all the buildings.
Yeah, and it was a really good opportunity for the middle school and the high school just to get together as a team and talk about, if an incident happens in 7th grade, what does that look like? What does that same incident look like in 9th or 10th grade if it happens? And if it happens once in 7th or 8th grade and then it happens again in 9th and 10th grade, what does that look like? And so it was a really good opportunity for us just to get together and norm as a team. So.
I think it was a great idea, putting you in charge and you involved for when these happens, to see if kids are on plans and to see what kind of other steps to take.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good work that we can do moving forward just with tightening up some things. And so I think I think there's good things ahead, and I think we have the right people at the table doing the right work. So.
How was this handled before? Because we had policy before.
We did, but we didn't always have opportunities to sit down and norm. And so I don't always feel like that maybe we were as connected between the middle school and the high school and how we were handling discipline. And so I feel like right now we're in a place where, well, to be honest, Cherry, some of these disciplinary issues weren't always there before. The AODA issues weren't always as significant a couple of years ago as they are now. Mental health concerns weren't as significant.
The reason I'm just asking is, are there other policies we need to antiquate and remove? And
Well, this would be a new policy, remember.
right, but are some of the other policies involved in it? Just because we've been looking through policies, so, because I know they're in the handbook, you have your, so the handbook was backed up by some I don't know, are there other, maybe there's not, maybe there weren't any, and now we have a new one.
I would say our other policies, they separate, everything out. So you have bullying policy and the harassment policy, and but this says in all situations and all different behaviors what constitutes a level 1 versus a level 2 and a level 3, and what the response is. At minimum, doesn't say it has to be, will absolutely be this or that, but at a minimum, what would the response be to those level behavior infractions? Yeah.
As we start to implement this policy, what is the plan for tracking violations and then also tracking the success of any restorative interventions so that we know if this is actually working? You knew I was going to ask this.
Of course I knew you were going to ask that. So Holly can speak a little bit to what the high school does weekly, and as well as how we record things in Infinite Campus. So violations are always recorded in Infinite Campus. But we also have a committee called what we would call PST, like a problem-solving team. And we track on a dashboard our students who might be flagged for at-risk, say, a student who's violating, their attendance, their grades, the number of incidents they have, the number of violations, if they're repeat offenders, if they are involved in like a small group activity or a small group like restorative piece. Lot of layers in that, right? Like if you're in a small group, did they attend? Like that's important. Did they participate? Did they engage? So all of those pieces will be built into an individual profile for students.
And then will we have access to the stats? Not the names, obviously.
You would have access to the stats,
okay,
not the names.
And with the new AODA coordinator position that was mentioned 2 weeks ago, sorry, with the new AODA coordinator position, we've been having a lot of conversations about tracking that information so that we can bring that not only to the staff at MHS, but to you guys as well as how it's working.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
And we will have this policy then on in 2 weeks, at the end of the month, for approval from the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to finance and facilities topics.
Right, so I just brought some information tonight to let you know that we need to start moving towards settling our 4K rates of pay that we provide to our community partners. So I provided on that memo the rates of pays that we've provided our partners since the first year we did this in 2015-16. Colleen Hoyne is going to meet with the 4K community partner directors on Wednesday, and we'll have a conversation about what their needs are. Now, we learned from last year that they had some tough to fill positions, a position that we ultimately had to provide to one of our community partners because it's extremely difficult to get a part-time 4K teacher in some of our facilities or anywhere really. So we'll have that conversation, and I'll look to make a recommendation for the board to consider in 2 weeks. So this is just informational right now to let you know that this will be coming your way, okay? Second thing then was just an ESSER update. I wanted to keep the board aware of what we've invested our one-time dollars in. We have continued to invest our one-time funds into one-time expenses. So I laid out in my memo what we've done with our dollars over the 22-23 school year. So we spent just a little over $70,000 in tutoring that we provide in a before and after school formats, and also for a Ready, Set, Go program, which is targeted for our elementary students in a 2-week August-based program where students who are identified as having needs in the reading area come in for 2 weeks in August. So we are continuing those efforts here in the current school year as we move forward. We had 2 additional full-time speech language pathologists. We also have a 40% guidance counselor position in Eagleville that will continue into this current school year. We have a full-time school psychologist position that we will also, again, continue into the current school year. We did letters training, so Stephanie Blue and her staff, we invested over $100,000 into the science of reading, and that effort is going to continue as we move forward into the upcoming school year. And then the bulk of our funding that we spent this past year were in math and reading interventionists. So we have 8 full-time positions that are in all 8 of our school buildings. And I apologize, there's one piece here that I see that I'm not lacking. We have 3 math coaches, one at the elementary, middle, and high school level. Oh, I'm sorry, no, it is embedded in there with the interventionist. We have 3 math coaching positions, 2 at the elementary level, and then one that's split between middle and high school. Those positions will continue again as we move into this school year. So we have 1 more year to use these funds to continue to help kids catch up for anything they might have missed in the last couple of years. Do you guys want any more detail on that? If you do, just reach out to me, but this is just FYI information. Okay?
Quick question. When do we start planning for what we're going to continue with for the 2024-2025 school year?
Now, I mean, we are working on that right now.
Those are funds that now we'll have to internalize that because this is the last time.
So these positions have always been communicated as being temporary in nature. So at the conclusion of 23-24, if we don't internalize these in our operating budget, then those positions would expire.
Okay.
So we've had those conversations, ongoing almost weekly about what do we need, what do we think we need to keep, what's worked well. So I think we're positioned well to consider all those things. And if there is something that we need to keep, we'll talk about that and make it happen.
Okay.
And that's all I had.
Any other questions? Thanks, Tom. Moving on to action items, appointments, resignations, and retirements.
Yeah, we have one appointment tonight, Mandy Minot for for Mukwonago High School art teacher. And then we have one resignation tonight, Ryan Germain, high school technology education teacher.
Joe, do we know why Mr. Germain resigned?
Different opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
I will make a motion that we approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion passes. Moving on to policy 0141.1, student representation at board meetings.
So per request of some board members, we have two policies or two draft language of the same policy. One is in board docs that you had a chance to review over the weekend. The other one was placed at your table. It is all in green and it says draft in the middle of it. And this would just be opened up, I guess, for some discussion right now as it pertains to student reps at board meetings.
I was wondering why we're changing it.
We did have a citizen complain that schools or students had more authority and more powers than they did when they were in meetings. So that was one reason. And two, through parliamentary training that we have gone through, it's just not appropriate for other people besides board members to discuss and to debate with the powers that were given to us by the people. I mean, it's not silencing them. They're still going to be here. We can still ask them questions. They can still talk.
What's the parliamentary training that that was gained that made us realize that our 20-year-old policy was inappropriate?
Well, one of the teachers in there was one of the 5 masters of parliamentary rule in the world. And we asked her specific questions about how we ran our boards, who was allowed to talk, when to talk. And she pretty much told us, or she didn't pretty much, she told us our board's a mess and we need to clean it up.
What's the mess part? The kids being able to speak?
There's certain times when people should be speaking during parliamentary rules. And when you're putting some people where they can debate and others can't, that creates division with our community, and people have spoken out about that.
So is it people or a person?
It was 2 people.
So 2 people over a 20-year span had a problem with kids being able to speak?
And just because it's been going on for 20 years doesn't make it right.
Well, true, but it also doesn't make it wrong.
Right.
One
There's no other government body that allows people to participate with elected officials when they're doing their business. There isn't one. I reached out to our state legislators. They all agree that it shouldn't happen. You should stick to your rules. There's a time when people can talk. People can reach out, just as Kylie did. She did today. She reached out and wanted to meet before the meeting, didn't have time. It's just disappointing that she didn't do that to begin with, instead went to social media. I think as a student rep and being a leader in the school, she should have reached out to us for a conversation.
Well, she doesn't get to reach out to us.
What's that?
She doesn't get to reach out to us, at least not during a board meeting.
She can reach out to us. She can email. She could reach out to administrators to talk and have conversations.
I think they hit it on the head when they said that they are at a different position. They go through some pretty rigorous stuff to get to sit in that seat. They're not a regular community member. I don't, if I'm being honest, I don't really care what some person says. I like the setup. I really enjoyed the back and forth that I had with Diego multiple times. I learned stuff. I want them to talk. This is the first time hearing about it that like I saw it on social media, and then I got the unbelievable number. I think I got more emails on this than I did on masks. Like in 2 days, that was a much better job. Kudos to everybody that spoke up, by the way. That was impressive. And I don't think it's bad. I'm firmly on team let the kids talk. Unless somebody can give me a better reason than somebody said we're a mess for letting them do it. I just disagree with that. And 2 people didn't like it. 2 unelected people who apparently are butthurt that some kids get to talk, then they don't. Okay, run for office. Run to sit in the chair. And
This doesn't say that kids can't talk.
Oh, it absolutely says they
No,
can't
it doesn't
talk.
say that.
They
When
don't
we're
let us talk during this.
when we're having a debate or a discussion, it doesn't mean I can't look at Diego or Madeline when they were here and say, what do you think about this? Do you really want your prom to be held here, or where graduation is going to be held? Those are the things that I want to hear. I'm not downplaying everything, but they're going to be sitting out there, so we can look to them and ask them questions.
Oh, they don't even.
It just is giving permission for
You
us.
didn't get to sit up here with us?
Did you read your board packet?
That's what they want to
read
propose, that they aren't able to sit with us,
Doesn't-
Vito.
What's that?
That is what they're proposing, that they're not able to sit with us.
Ridiculous.
So we can still look to them and ask them.
I don't know how we got on this. So we're gonna sit them out there, and
That's a great, we shoved Stephanie out there too. I just want to let you know.
no, Stephanie can sit there.
She can come up, and as will they when they do their presentation.
I think everybody sitting out there is rightfully outraged that we would consider changing this. This is wrong.
I don't
There's
think it's that wrong.
absolutely nothing, like nothing happened to cause this to change, other than 2 people complaining. 2 people complained, and now we're going to change something that's been working, and I personally benefited quite a bit from, and I know other people did too. And I mean, he wasn't lying when he said that we all patted him on, like, we were, God, how many people stood up and said, hey, it was great conversations, we learned a lot from you, and that wasn't because we happened to look at them at the right time, or we happened to let them speak. They spoke up when it was appropriate to speak up. And it was, if I'm being honest, it was a little weird at first, but once I got used to it, I got a lot from it.
What's stopping you from having those conversations outside of when the board is doing its business?
It doesn't work like that. Like if I have to look at you and acknowledge you for you to be able to make that statement, right now, it's not a conversation. If I have to, they have to remember, they have to write it down, they have to, what's that?
I just looked at you and I just asked you the question.
I know, but they don't get to do it now.
Sure.
If this passes,
You can ask
they're
them
not part of the
questions.
conversation. No, they don't, because then I have to respond, and we don't get to have that back and forth. And that, literally the reason we're all sitting here today is because I didn't like how committee setup was. This is the same thing as committee setup. When we had 3 different committees, and technically, if I was allowed to talk by whoever was sitting in the chair, then there got to be a back and forth. Then it was okay. But if we were to have somebody that was in charge of a committee and they didn't allow me to speak because that's what the rules said, I didn't get to speak. That's the same exact thing we're about to do that is being proposed we do to the kids. When it is the way it was, they just get to speak up and they get to have a back and forth, and everybody gets to hear it and everybody gets to benefit from it. If we're gonna force them to write us all an email, hope we all read it, and then get 8 different responses and not have an actual conversation, I don't get to hear what you have to say. I don't get any insight. I get nothing from that because it's an email and it's who knows what happens and when it happens. A conversation that can be had in front of everybody is a much better way to communicate. I get, what's the worst form of communication? Text message. Next worst, phone call. Best form, face-to-face. I get to see facial expressions. I get to react. If I have that opportunity with the kids, I would much prefer have them here. I would like to, I don't think we should do this at all.
I think you made a great point. When we had individual committee meetings, we weren't allowed to talk because of rules. And that's the way it goes. And that's what we have to abide by.
Oh, no.
And
no.
that's,
We absolutely don't
no,
have to
that's
abide by
why we went to committee of the whole, so we weren't breaking any rules and laws.
No.
Yes,
no,
that
we
is
didn't
why.
we didn't abide by that. The person that was running committee allowed us to do it.
Correct.
We didn't abide by it.
But it was all depending on that person, right?
Yes.
But our
Because
policy
that's-
allowed for
Because
it.
that's the rules. Those were the rules that we had to abide by, yes. And so you're saying parents, your students, their children should have more rights than they do? Is that what you're really saying?
Nope, just those two.
No, that's, exactly.
Yeah, yes, I'm
So,
saying
yes.
those two should
Okay.
have more rights than
Okay.
I think they earned it. Just like we earn the right to say and do stuff, they earn the right by going through what they went through.
So
They're chosen.
other boards,
Not elected.
Joe,
Chosen.
you've been around the world a little bit. Are other boards similar, different?
This is a unique policy among the policies that I've looked at for student presentations and representatives to the board. What is on the books currently allows for a greater level of participation for the students than my prior experience.
I reached out to Germantown, Waukesha, Muskego. None of them allow it.
I think we're better than all them.
Me too.
I think we're better than all them because of our policies.
Okay.
So I would suggest we don't take away the policies that make us better.
This was something that I was new to, seeing them.
Speak in the mic,
are-
please.
Okay, this was something I was new to, seeing them, students be part of the board as it is here. I've been worked in other districts, and we didn't have that within our boards. And I guess what I have a hard time understanding is I don't think they're losing their voice by setting it up differently. They still have a report to give. They can bring what's going on with the students during their report presentation. It's kind of like they're working like Stephanie does, or Christine. They're coming, they're presenting, they're sharing. No one's cutting them off. They have their voice, and they are students. So I feel like it is different because we have to look out for students, parents, community. We have a much bigger role. We need their input. And I'm all for students speaking, and it's wonderful having representatives, but I don't see where we're taking their voice away and what they have to tell us about what's going on in the schools.
We are 100% taking their voice away when we stop them from being able to be a part of the conversation. Because a conversation requires me to be like, you said that to me, and now I respond.
But we have the same opportunity with them. We would.
No, you don't.
That's how I see it.
We absolutely do not. They're all in agreement that we're not, because when the stuff is happening, there's not a back and forth, and everybody doesn't gain from it.
Wow.
So it's...
Erica?
I mean, I've had my hand up for a little
I
while,
do
and we
apologize.
do have like rules that we're discussing and how we operate, and I have a couple of things. I actually have a lot of things. I want to start with a clarifying question to you. You said, we received parliamentary training, and they told us. I would like to know who the we and the us are, because I was not part of that.
I was in there. I was invited by, I believe it was, I don't remember who it was.
But you just went?
I did not go. Crosby and Jake were there as well.
So you did not go, they went.
I went there,
Okay.
Crosby and Jake.
So you three went, you got some information, you didn't bring it back to the board. Somehow it shows up in a policy that seems to come out of left field with no warning. It sounds like if you guys went and this policy showed up, you guys talked about it. So there was some sort of discussion, but I didn't hear any of this until my college-age daughter saw it on social media, and she's like, you're getting rid of student reps. I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course not. We would never do that, because I'm with Vito. It is absolutely taking their voice away. And to say, we're not taking their voice away, it's no different. We'll still be able to do it. Then why the change? If it's no different, keep it the way it is. I think when we are working strongly on teacher retention and HR things and how we deal with our staff that are the advisors to these clubs, if we don't like something, if there needs to be a change, our first step should be to go to them and say, we have a concern. We think there's a problem. We think they're speaking out of turn. Can you talk to them? Tell them only to speak if they've been spoken to. If those are our concerns, that should be step one. It should not show up in a policy. Not to mention, I'm going to go with a point of order here. This evening, we looked at a disciplinary consequences for student misconduct policy under the policy tab. And yet, we have two policies that have not yet been discussed under possible action items. Our own bylaws tell us that any policy that we're going to vote on has to be presented at a board meeting prior to the vote. Hence, 5600 came to us today, and we're going to vote on it on the 28th. To have two policies that we're going to talk about and potentially vote on violates our own policy 131.1 on bylaws and policies. So we need to make sure that we're following our own rules. I don't find it at all inappropriate that our board members, that our student reps who do go through a very long process, get to sit here and get to speak. Now, it also says in the policy, as appropriate. So if we feel like as a board that maybe there have been some out of turn commentary, then we address that, the as appropriate part. I don't think we jump to change a policy. We can't jump and change a policy every single time something doesn't go exactly how we want it, because our policy allows for us, we created this policy in 2003, valuing the voices of the students who don't get the right to vote. And if 2 citizens came and spoke and didn't like this, but we have a petition that is, when I looked on the way here, was at 411. I mean, the scales are very, very tipped in support of keeping the things as they are. I mean, I could go on and on and on. We hear from board members all the time, like, I talked to my teenage neighbor the other day and they told me this. We clearly value the voice of our students. So why we would tell them, oh, go sit back there, speak when you're spoken to, I don't think that looks good. I don't think that's beneficial. One of my favorites, student reps, Ben Benzinger, I'm pulling a name blast out of the past. I don't know if anybody here knows him. Somebody on YouTube, tag him please so he can hear this. But he sat right over here and he interjected on 2 occasions that have drastically changed our policy. Before we had Chromebooks, one-to-one in the high school, teachers were saying, hey kids, bust out your cell phones because I need you to log into this. And he's like, I just want to let you know I still have a flip phone and I can't do that. And our teachers are depending on the fact that we all have smartphones, but we don't all have smartphones. And we're all like, huh, we're going to have to do something about that. We didn't think to look to him and say, hey, what do you think about that policy? He had to interject to tell us that. And that birthed our whole one-to-one Chromebook thing at the high school, which, by the way, saved our butts when COVID came. Another Ben Benzinger moment, he sat over there when we were talking about our active shooter drills. And they're talking about how they work, and we're getting the report of how well they went. And he had to raise his hand, and he's like, so we're always told when we're in the room, like by an announcement, they'll say, hey, the shooter is now on the north end of the gym, so what should you do? And he's like, none of us know what the north end is. Like, we're in closed rooms with doors closed, lights, like no windows. We don't know what direction. It changed our active shooter drills. But we never would have thought to turn and say, hey, what do you guys think of the active shooter drills? It's because they were there, they were available, and they spoke up. It wasn't just, please address us only when you've been spoken to first. I think it's an imperative. I feel blindsided by this policy. I think it's completely unnecessary of a change. I do not support it. I talked to Maura Friend, who helped start this up 20 years ago. She gave me great background today on it. I talked to Carlos Romo, who is very hurt and frustrated, as he should be, that he has never been talked to about any displeasure with this program that he spends a lot of time on.
Nobody knew like how this process works. Nobody knows how this process works, or not many people do on the board.
Did you ask? Because I know, and Jerry knows, and Stephanie knows, and Jim, who comes, he knows. So instead of asking, we just changed the policy?
No, what I'm saying is, you want to talk about like transparency, what I was asking was, how does this process work? They're not elected, right? And what I was told when I asked Joe, I was like, how does this work? I reached out to Joe and asked him. He said they're selected by a teacher, and then it goes to administration, and they decide who's going to go. They discuss it.
I mean, sort of. It is far more complex than that. I mean, it is a long, rigorous process. I mean, Mrs. Cassio can speak to it. We've been in the interview process together for the last couple years. Letters of recommendation have to be sought. They have to fill out essays and applications and resumes, and we spend a whole day interviewing them with big questions. And I mean, these are our high-achieving kids.
Who decides who does this?
They all apply. They self-apply.
No. Who decides who's on this committee?
The interview committee?
Yes.
It is our social studies department, many of them, I believe, and then there's always a board liaison as well as administrators.
Who decides that?
You'd have to ask the program who it's led by. Probably our liaison, our student rep, like our German club is run by a teacher. That's what do you even call them? Why can I not think of the word? A teacher representative for...
Advisor?
Advisor, that's the word, thank you, a teacher advisor. So this program has a teacher advisor that runs it. So he would reach out and invite people to be part of the process.
Jake?
So I keep hearing students being represented, right? But what I haven't heard is how the students have no say in this. The students aren't a part of this process. That's where I struggle a little bit. We want the students to be represented, but they have no say.
Can you clarify what you're saying? I'm not following.
Students at the schools, who they're representing, do they have any say in this process?
In who's the representative? Is that what you mean?
Want the students
Who the representatives
you want
are.
the students to
And-
elect the
So
representative,
right
is that what you're saying?
Right now, yes or no, do the students have any say in who is representing them?
The student body.
The student body, correct.
I don't believe so.
That's where I struggle.
That's not a terrible point.
But at the same time, I mean, that's sort of how the process works, even like when we get elected. The community doesn't get to choose who runs, they get to choose who's on the ballot.
Get to vote.
That's not a,
It's the people that sell, right, and they don't.
that's not a terrible,
Like-
what he's bringing up isn't a terrible point. I mean, I'm completely.
That's what prom court is for. That's what homecoming is for.
So we
That's
don't
what
take this-
Very
representative is
different.
for.
We don't take this seriously? That,
No, not at all. I'm saying
the whole
prom
point
court,
is for the students to be represented. They have no say in who is representing them. Zero say.
What if 50 students disagree with our student reps?
okay,
They
so
never
just
voted for
so
it.
you know, I don't know if you have kids in the high school right now or if you've seen what our student reps do on behalf of our high schoolers. They are active, they are engaged in seeking opinions, in talking to all groups, and going out there soliciting the information. It's not just about their friend group or who shows up. They take this role very seriously.
So then why shouldn't they be elected?
Well, I mean,
What do you mean? They're not, I don't understand that
Hang on.
question. Why shouldn't
Why
they be
can't the
elected?
people that they're representing have the opportunity to vote to decide who is representing them instead of, it sounds like one person appoints them and then they met with 2 board members apparently. I don't know how the board
I think
members
it's
are selected.
Group of 8 of us as a whole that did the interviewing. I guess my personal opinion would be that when you have adults in the room that want to choose the best candidates for who are dedicated to the cause, who are going to put in the time, who have the skills and the abilities, the characteristics, they answer well, they present themselves well, that the adults are taking that pretty seriously in how they select and how they choose. Would that same fervor be put in by students, or would it just become a popularity contest?
But even if that's the problem, that is not what we're discussing here. How the person is chosen is not what we're discussing. We're discussing the fact that they have a representation here altogether.
Well, if you look at her petition on change.org, she claims that she is an elective representative. Second sentence, in her change.org, she claims she's an elected representative. So I think if you look, pardon me, please. If you look at her whole change.org and you want to talk about and give credibility to it, there's a lot of stuff in here that is not true and misleading.
I did look at it. I have to pull that up again because I don't know if I agree with that statement.
Well, she claims she's an elected official.
Okay, I'll give her the word
And then she
selected and
infers
effective.
that the news broke and that we're hiding something and trying to sneak something through.
Well,
which
it
is
does
not-
feel
which-
that way
which
to
is-
me.
Which is not true. Actually, the agenda came out a day earlier than it normally comes out. It came out on Thursday rather than Friday. So it actually came out earlier. There's nothing hiding. It's all in the agenda.
Well, the fact that it's under action items absolutely makes it look like it. It should be under policies with the other proposed policy. It should not be under action items.
Okay.
Nor should the committee
It's
one that's
still
coming
not
up
hiding
next.
it. It's out in public for everybody to read. You can debate that, but you can't debate that we're hiding it. You can't accuse the board and this district of hiding information when it's out there in public, and it actually came out earlier than what it normally does. That is false.
That's an opinion. She
So
gets
is the
that, she
opinion
gets to have an opinion.
And,
She
and,
gets
when,
to
and I
voice it.
felt.
And so do we.
Yes, and so do we. And that is another thing that I have under my notes when it was my turn to speak, is I do feel that this was like forced through. It was not, whenever we've done policies, first they are discussed, then they are proposed, that's the first reading, at a first board meeting, and then they are voted on at the second. And when it came out that the board members wanted to do this, I went, wait a minute, I thought I was a board member. I don't want to do this. Why is this saying this? And why is it going out to the public like this? So yes, maybe she felt that it was being hidden. I felt that it was not told, it was not, we are not board members unless we're sitting at this table. We are only board members when we're sitting here. That was one of the first things that I was taught when I was trained, that we are individuals as soon as we leave this room. The only time we are a board is when we're together. That is how it works. And so when something is said, the board, it has to have at least been discussed at this table with 9 people. It cannot be brought out from the blue and then voted on when we haven't even discussed it. So it wasn't the board. So I felt blindsided. I was like, holy schmoly, what is going on? So Dale, maybe you figure that maybe she reacted a little, okay? I reacted a lot when I heard this.
And I want to address, Erica, where you were saying about the student reps not having, about the old student rep, that nothing's stopping our reps from doing that now. This policy does not stop that.
So why are
They
we
can
changing it?
address the board because there's proper ways of going about it.
That's
That's why.
an opinion.
It's not an opinion.
I think we
What
need to define
what other government body allows this?
It doesn't matter. School boards actually have a lot of different state legislative law than any other governing body. And because of local control, we get to set our own policies for ourselves. If this is something that this board values, we are allowed to do that regardless of what anybody else does. We can be a leader. We can do things different because that's the power given to us.
We
And you-
certainly can.
And you had said a few minutes ago that in the committees, when we had our committee forum, and I remember this because it was really irritating to me, because I would go to committees and, oh, you can't talk. I'm sorry, it was Andy, poor Andy, would be like, you can't talk in his committee. But and when you know, because you served on the committee of which I was chair, and I believe that everybody has the right to speak. And I let everybody speak, didn't I, Dale?
You
and you were
did.
one of those people, right?
You did.
Okay, and so you're saying our bylaws said that it was up to the committee chair to determine if people were going to be able to speak. We now are the committee chair. We have the right to say that people have the ability to speak, which would mean these student reps would have the ability to sit at this table and speak, because we have that authority to give it to them, because that is our policy. And we are saying that we want to be transparent. We want to include the kids, and now we're saying, as long as they're sitting over there. And you said, yes, they can say their things. What are they going to do? Sit in the place over there and say, can I speak? When they're sitting at a table, like Vito said, they're in the conversation. This has worked for 30 years. I have nothing, I wrote. In my years on the board, I have been nothing but impressed and encouraged by our student reps. Their input and efforts to represent the students of MASD have been an important part of our meetings. Their commitment and time given to the Mukwonago community should be celebrated, not discouraged. Each year, I feel our representatives have been more informed, connected to the student body, and more articulate as they grow in confidence. You can be assured that I am sharing my concerns. I wrote that. And then I'm putting on here, it's like, who brought this up? It's like, who brought it up? What was the problem? The only problem is that there's a parliamentary rule. That is our problem. That is not a problem. It's not because they did a bad job. It's not because they said something they weren't supposed to. It's not because they're not qualified. It's not because of any of those reasons. It's because of some rule that somebody made who knows when. And why would we discourage students from participating in local government and becoming involved citizens? Why would we discourage that in any way, shape, or form? Why would we not want to hear what they have to say? What reason do you have that any thought or idea that these representatives, that these kids that have gone to their peers, that they have any less worth than any consideration we have? I'm sorry, but
they still have the voice.
This is bizarre. This whole thing is bizarre, and I don't know if there were conversations outside of this room, if there were walking quorum violations given or done, but this broke my heart. I have said to someone that this might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. If our district is going to go down this far with our students, it's a shame. It's a crying shame.
So I would like to propose for this policy, as well as the next one that we discuss, that they cannot be, I do not believe, based on how our own bylaws, that we can vote on these. I know it says for possible action. I don't think we can take any action. There is a two reading requirement for in our own policy. So I don't believe we can, my opinion and my interpretation of our policies is that we can do this. One, I don't even think we can vote on it tonight. Two, I certainly would not. Three, I would just like to point of order, if a board member would request a policy to be brought forth, like the next one, 155, which I requested to be brought forth, the policy should just be brought forth as is. The discussion that then ensues around that policy gives the board member or board members who wanted it discussed the opportunity to share their rationale about it. I do not believe it should show up with any revisions, because this makes it look like this was pre-discussed by somebody, and I don't know who that is, because I requested the next policy, and it's completely changed in all the ways that I would not have suggested it, and it was the policy I asked for it to be brought. I asked for it to be brought back in April. It didn't come May, it didn't come June, it didn't come July, it came August, completely rewritten. It's like, but the current concerns haven't been addressed. Like, we haven't had open public dialogue. So while I think we should talk about both of these policies and what we would like to see changed or not, I don't believe they can be acted on, not with our own policy. And I don't know that our committee of the whole is working for us if we're gonna do this. If we're gonna put action items outside of HR business, I believe that the resignations, the retirements, and the hirings, those are appropriate at a committee of the whole. I don't believe any other action items are appropriate at a committee of the whole, and I think we need to discuss that because we have 2 readings, and this is a committee. We might all be here, and we have all 9, but this is replacing our committee structure. So I'm like, either let's go back to committee structure, or we have to get action items off of the committee of the whole agenda.
Is that accurate, Joe? Because I feel like we voted on things outside of appointments and resignations.
The board can vote to waive a policy, a 2-reading policy, for instance. That would require the board to vote to waive, I forget what the exact bylaw number, and then take action on the motion to waive the policy, and then take action to either approve or
So we would waive the first reading.
You would have to waive the first reading, first reading requirement, which would allow the board to vote then on the policy that's on the agenda tonight. So that would be the process that you would have to follow.
And that's specific to policy. I'm not talking about just policy. I'm saying voting on any action item at the committee of the whole, I think, outside of HR functions is out of line because, like I said, this, I felt blindsided. Came out of left field. Revisions, like, where did this come from? We haven't even talked about it. Why would we be even just, like, acting on anything that has not yet been publicly discussed? Because then you would bring it back to the next board meeting. Again, I'm just kind of baffled how on the agenda we did it right for one policy, but the other 2 we didn't.
Okay. Doing something here.
I'd like to make a motion to waive the first reading requirement on policy 0131.1.
I'll second.
Wait. What policy did you just say? You said
Oh.
031.1?
131.1.
That's the bylaw and policy that I read earlier. That's not any of the policies on the agenda. We're looking at, we've got 141.1, the student rep at the board, or 155 committees.
I'm talking about waiving the first reading.
You can't waive the first reading when we don't even have a policy. You have 2 different forms of the same policy. You haven't even decided what your policy is going to be. So you can't waive a reading on something that doesn't exist.
Didn't we just say we have to waive the policy before we pass
First,
this?
you have to have a policy to waive the first reading on. Right now, you have 2 separate things that you might, and I don't even have a copy of what the original policy was. In order for this to be voted on in any way, shape, or form, we need a copy of the original policy to see what the changes are. Because in any other time, the writing in green would be what the policy was, the writing in red would be what the policy is changing to. We do not have an original policy here.
I thought the original policy is on this one. That doesn't say draft.
The original. It's crossed out, Cherry. I mean, the original is there, but you have to look through the lines on the red.
So this is the one with the pink on it is the original?
Yeah. Yes.
And you're proposing it to change to the green? Is that what we got going here?
Yes.
Of which,
And then,
is this publicly on the agenda for everyone to see? Is this on board docs?
Has
it is
anybody,
not.
has anybody seen this?
No, I was gonna make an amendment to change the wording on here, and that's why I asked him to have it printed out.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I was gonna make an amendment to the original one posted, and the amendment I was gonna read that's on the all green one, the one that says draft. I thought the language needed to be cleaned up, so I was gonna make an amendment to go to the draft.
The draft that nobody saw? Is that,
It
is that okay?
was gonna be an amendment. If I was gonna make an amendment,
We can,
We don't have a motion on the table to amend right now.
so we can, I'm just checking.
Yeah,
procedure
the
here.
board
We-
members can be provided a copy of language ahead of the meeting to look at and be discussed then in the meeting.
And then we can vote on that without the public seeing
That's-
what's on it? Okay, I'm just checking.
You are the ones that vote and set the policy, so the language would have to be read in at the meeting, but you as a board can look at and add and edit as the meeting goes on.
Okay.
So you can do your own wordsmithing as the meeting would go on, and that doesn't necessarily have to be what's in board docs. It can be what's debated and decided at the meeting.
Okay.
all right, I'd like to make a motion to pass the draft language in student representative at board meetings. The school board acknowledges the important contributions students can make. The board believes that student participation at board meetings can provide a better understanding of the needs and concerns of students. The board, therefore, authorizes 2 student representatives to represent all students of the district. The representative shall, A, be selected by high school administration, B, present the student representative report to the board, and C, be seated at the district director's table to answer any question may arise. Student representatives are encouraged to communicate with all students in the district. The student representatives shall not vote on matters that come before the board or otherwise participate in discussions unless as part of the student representative report, citizens' comments, or as otherwise authorized by the board. The superintendent or his or her designee shall hold an orientation meeting with the new student representatives. The meeting shall include A, an explanation of the board's role and purpose, B, transferring all relevant materials and information, and C, an explanation of the student representative's role.
So this new reading, this draft, excludes be encouraged to sit at the board table and enter in discussions and answer questions in the same manner as an elected board members, and it excludes participate during the regular open meeting of the board. That's what you're saying. It excludes
Correct.
both of those things.
Correct.
I'm reading those for the record.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion or comments?
I have to ask those of you that are prepared to vote for this, if you have thought it all the way through, the consequences that come in passing this. Have you really thought it all the way through? I think they're detrimental. I think it's gonna come back to bite you in the butt. I think you're gonna hand every single high schooler the microphone and the power that maybe they're gonna need to take and run from this anyway, to be the voice constantly at this door. If you pass this, I encourage high schoolers, show up and comment. I mean, in your email that you responded on behalf of the board, and just point of clarification for everyone listening, because this had not yet been discussed or voted on, because we're about to do that now, any email or response that you received was not on behalf of the board. I don't agree with this at all. But one of the responses that I saw said, oh, well, you can put your thoughts and your views and your concerns in your board report. I want to make sure you remember that. If that's what you were told, to go ahead and put it in your board report, and this passes right now, put it in your board report.
I think you're being a little divisive.
Oh,
I think this whole policy is divisive. This whole policy is divisive. It came from a divisive spirit. If you read between the lines, nothing about this is unifying. Everything about this is tearing apart this board, relationship we've worked so hard to build with our high schoolers. And I would still contend we shouldn't be voting on this at all because there has not been a waive of the first reading yet. We are out of order in our own policy. I don't even know what's going on anymore.
And this not only is dividing of the students, it is dividing of our staff. We sit here and we try to improve their wages and whatever, and yet this is how we support the clubs that they offer. We've had teachers come. You have read the teachers' emails. You have read parents' emails. So we have parents, students, and community. This is staff, students, and community. This, right tonight, has shown all three of those people what you think of them. And it will make an impact. And we are going for a referendum, folks. We're asking them for money.
I want to know, what are we gaining from this? So we know what we're losing. I mean, we all know that we're losing voices. The kids are losing their ability to speak up when they see fit. So that's what we're losing. We're losing people being able to talk. And you can, I don't care what you say. Any of you guys that want to tell me, look me in my eyes and tell me that they are not getting their voices taken away from them, it's just not true. If we say, that's the whole point, you don't get to sit here anymore and you don't get to talk. If that's not taking their voice away, please tell me what is taking their voice away. I mean, do we have to muzzle them? Is that what taking their voice away is? So what we're losing is their voice. What are we gaining?
So Vito,
Please tell me what we're gaining.
I think our board reps have been pretty phenomenal, no doubt. But when we have social media involved and other avenues which might be a problem, and if we're the only board that has this student rep thing, I don't know what the negatives are. I don't process things that quickly.
That's why we should wait for a vote for a different meeting, because that's why you do have two readings, because you need time to think and figure out what we're doing, rather than just, this is just because.
I don't see what we're getting. Nobody's telling me what we're gaining. What are we gaining? What do we get for this move? We're going to take action. What do we get for our action? Anybody? You brought it, you seconded it. You guys should be speaking up at least. What do we get?
I said all I need to say.
So we get nothing. You're not going to tell me what we get?
We get an equal playing field for all of our citizens.
So we have community members sitting out there right now that are just dying to jump in and speak and say what they want to think, and that's what is going to be given to the student representatives that could be sitting up at this table with a microphone, speaking whenever they want. When we have tax-paying citizens and people that are super upset, because I sat out there for 2 years just dying to burst out, but I couldn't because that wasn't allowed, so I didn't.
And look,
had I had a microphone, which I went out and earned and got elected to get, now I'm able to speak whenever I want. So that's the difference. Elected officials like us, because we worked really hard and we're supported by the community. 400 signatures, that's great, that's super impressive, but we have over 4,000 students in the district, so you have 8% of the student people behind you. That's great. I am an elected representative, and I would, if they could be elected, that's a whole different story, but they're not.
So the opportunity to vote and actually make the difference isn't enough for you guys? You guys have to be the only people that get to talk?
You can talk too. We all talked.
So that basically, to sum up what your position is I ran, so I am the only person that gets to talk because I got elected. I get to be the decider of who gets to talk.
If we could let our community members come in here and have open conversations and speak freely, that would be great. That's not in our policy or in our bylaws.
And that would create chaos. How do you control a meeting if you have 50 people coming up here and being able to interject anytime they want to? That's why
now you guys
processes are in place.
Now you guys are talking about things that aren't real. Now you're just making things up. You're just grabbing things out of thin air. We currently have a policy that says that they get to talk, and it's worked for 20 years. There is no problem. The only problem here is you guys don't like that they get to talk. That's the only problem. If you guys, I'm telling you, I will.
We got to do something here.
Yeah, let's see where the shame is going to be.
Any more discussion? We have a motion and a second.
Don't roll your
Oh,
eyes.
can we actually even do this?
So the order would have to be that you would have to waive the bylaw that talks about policy approval, the 2 reading requirement. So that would be the first thing that the board would have to take a vote on. Then if that passes, then the board would be able to vote on the proposed policy change that is in front of you tonight. So it would have to go in that order. There
I
would have-
believe I made a motion and there was a second on that already.
So the order would have to be, the vote would have to happen on the bylaw 0131.
Yeah, and I think Dale did try, and I was confused by what he was doing, so I did stop him. I apologize. Now I see what you're saying. I'm used to I make a motion that we waive the first reading, so I wasn't following. But I think that's what you were trying.
Correct.
Okay.
So just so we can capture the minutes correctly, could we have the motion on the 0131.1 and then the second so that that can be captured?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to waive policy 0131.1.
And I will second.
Did you capture that, Laura? Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
I want a roll call vote.
I would ask for a roll call vote
Okay.
as well.
Let's do a roll call vote. All in
Crosby.
favor, raise your, oh,
Erica?
No.
Jake?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Dale?
aye.
Vito?
No.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Craig?
Aye.
Cherry? Absolutely not.
So
You
Laura,
should
how
be.
did that work out from a vote? So 6-3, it passes.
Correct. So motion carries. Want to move to passing the new policy that I just read into the microphone. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any more discussion? All in favor of the new
Roll
policy?
call vote.
Okay,
Yeah,
go
yeah,
roll
I
call
want
vote.
everybody on, yeah, yep, yeah, you too.
Crosby,
Everybody.
Brugenhagen.
Aye.
Erica Connor.
No.
Jake?
Aye.
Gail Lesage.
Aye.
Dale Porter.
Aye.
Vito Schwartz.
Absolutely not.
Carolyn Simon.
Aye.
Craig Verts. Sherry Winchowski. Absolutely not.
Okay, I would like to share my concern of a walking quorum. I'm going to just say, to have this proposal come forward like this, to have 6 of you all on the same field somehow, when we had not yet discussed it. I mean, we've talked about walking quorums and what they are, and it's a violation of open meetings. These discussions can only happen at open meetings. And it feels to me, I'm not going to make an allegation, but it feels to me that there were discussions that took place prior to this policy being discussed here tonight. And shame on us if that's the case.
Noted. Moving on to policy 0155, committees.
So the policy is being brought forward tonight to be discussed, possibly take action on, and then to talk about aligning our policy with what our current practice is around a committee of the whole versus individual committees that used to exist in the district.
So I would like to share I referenced it already, the policy that I had asked to be brought forward when we switched from committee to committee of the whole because we didn't have any policy laying out committee of the whole. I would never have asked that the committee structure be stricken because when we voted to come to the committee of the whole, it was sort of on a trial basis. We said, we'll try it for 6 months, we'll revisit it and see if we like it. So I would have for sure always left if we had discussed this before this showed up, added committee of the whole language versus getting rid of the committee structure language. And then a lot of times they have the checkbox, hey, which one are we doing? Oh, now we're gonna do committee, check. Here's our guidance because it's in policy. Because now if we adopt this as is, and I think maybe this is a starting point and maybe this is feedback you're looking for, I don't know, we're gonna have to keep revising the policy if we switch back and forth, which since I've been on the board and for the last 9 years, we have switched multiple times. So I think it would be short-sighted for us to strike the committee language and the definitions of these committees in the fact that a future board may decide to return to it. So I think I was looking for the addition of committee of the whole language, not a replacement.
In the past, when you switch back and forth, or if we did, would we just revise where the check mark is? If it's like committee of the whole language.
That would make an easy change in my mind.
Language.
We haven't had that policy like set up that way, so that's just how I envisioned a possibility.
So when this question was brought to me by Sean and Dale about needing to address this policy, I reached out to Neola to look at the committee, what language did they have about committee of the whole, and they had no language that outlined committee of the whole. They also didn't have any specific language that talked about which committees a district would have. So the committee policy was set up by Neola to kind of give general framework that the board would delegate certain responsibilities to committees. So in working with Richard Zimman, our policy consultant from Neola, the language that you have in front of you is what was recommended by him, should the board want to make a change in policy. The reason why, excuse me, the reason why policy, finance, and learning were taken off is because from the moment that the committee of the whole was formed, those committees no longer existed. So in their absence, we didn't have it. Now, the thing that the board, we should all know is that our historical language will be there. So if at a time in the future the board would go back to finance committee, learning committee, so have you, we then can just grab the old language, build it back in, and make a modification at that time. But the request that I had was to align our policy with what our practice is, which is the language that you have in front of you tonight.
And I think the language, almost all of it, is fine. I still would appreciate having them side by side, because a future board, if they didn't know that committees were an option, they wouldn't know what to ask you, like, hey, can you give us that old policy? If it's here in the bylaws and the policies and they can read it and they see what do committee structures look like in comparison to the committee of the whole, I think there's a great benefit for both of them to be there side by side. I guess I have questions about what a board liaison looks like. I guess that doesn't seem to be defined for me. The board president will appoint board members to serve as board liaisons to the business department, human resources department, and learning department, and student services. I don't know if I feel completely comfortable with that, but I also don't have a good idea of what that even means or what that looks like. Can you elaborate?
So prior to, there was a board member who served as the chair to the committee that would work with one of the administrators to plan the committee agenda. Since there is no longer a committee, there would be a board member assigned to the department that you would go to talk, questions could be asked, answered, similar to how the old agendas were formatted or were created and then presented. So this would just be a rep from the board connected to Tom, Stephanie, Christine, Rachel, going into the future for purposes of planning for the committee of the whole meeting. But again, absent a committee, you don't have a committee chair anymore.
So the liaisons would be appointed by you, Doc, or by the board?
By the board president, similar to what the committee chairs were were appointed in the past.
So Tom would be the finance liaison, probably?
Whoever has worked with Tom on the finance agenda would work with Tom on the finance agenda. Board member connected to.
Will the board member be a liaison?
So past practice, however, committees, like board members were able to put preferences at that April reorganization meeting as to which committee they would like to be on. The board president would take that into consideration and assign everybody to a committee. Our current practice, although it's not outlined in the committee policy, would be that that committee would, amongst themselves, appoint the chair. Because not everyone on that committee might feel comfortable being the chair, or maybe they think, hey, you've got the most experience, you should do it. I think when I requested for this policy to come up, that didn't take place. We didn't fill out any sheets for preference where we would like to be put. We were assigned, and then the chair was selected. And it was moot because we ended up going to committee of the whole. But those are not lined out in our previous policy. I think it is more advantageous for the board to have the say and to vote, just like we do on other things, on who those liaisons or committee chairs would be. I'll leave it at that. So I guess my concerns are, my preference in asking for this to be brought forward was to add committee of the whole language, to coexist with committee structure in the event that our board or future boards would choose to go back.
Is there a reason why Neolia would recommend it to be? Is there a reason why Neolia would recommend it to be this way versus what Erica was looking for?
You no longer have the other committees.
Okay.
So by policy designation, you would not have a finance committee. And so to be clear with people as to how board business would be done, it would be done in the format of a committee of the whole.
Okay.
Any more discussion? I'd like to make a motion to pass policy 0155.
Do we need to waive the first reading?
Okay.
This hasn't been brought up before, or no?
Correct.
I mean, the other option would be a motion to table, if we needed to table it, and we could come back in 2 weeks on the 28th for the board meeting to discuss it, if that's what the committee would wish.
I'd like to make a motion to waive the first reading of policy 0131.1.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion?
Erica, what would you like to happen?
I think it should be tabled. I don't think there's been enough time to look at it, to decide. There's been no other discussion or opinions shared. I think we'd be at a loss by eliminating this. And I think it's just making more work for ourselves if we, in a couple more months, are like, let's go back to committee structure, which I honestly am tempted to suggest unless we fix our action item issue.
Or we go to 2 board meetings a month, because that's just what
But
we're doing.
that still wouldn't comply with our bylaw where you have to bring these policies more
Well, no,
than
you'd
one
have-
time.
That's true.
I mean, we do have to follow our own system, so.
So I'm trying to understand your concern if this was written by Neolia, and that's their suggestion because we don't have committees anymore. What's the concern? That it wasn't what you wanted it to say?
Oh, no, my concern is that it feels as though it's taking away an option. We have fluctuated back and forth. The option has always been available to be either a committee structure or a committee of the whole, that the current board is allowed to switch, to go back and forth. So I feel like our policy should reflect that if that is something that we are interested in doing. I don't think the policy should just state, this is what we're doing right now. Even though that would be current, I understand that, but it just makes more work for, this is not working for us, because different bodies do it differently. Like, I actually think our committee of the whole, for the most part, is working outside of the action item. Our previous committee of the whole was a disaster. So different bodies and different boards make up different processes that work, and I think it is important to have that option available to boards. That's
What would that policy look like, Joe? Sorry, Carol.
I would have to take a look at what it would look like, you know, in the event that the board elected to go back to a committee structure, the following committee structures would be in place. And then whatever organizational steps that were taken by the board and like what April with the reorganization, those steps then would be outlined in policy that the board would follow to designate the members of the committee, and then the committee then would pick their leadership. So we'd have to spell that out and kind of have if the board operates as a committee of the whole, this is how it would go. If the board operates under a committee structure, this is then how it would be spelled out. So we would need a couple days to kind of spell that out for the final draft of this policy.
Is there an advantage of having it written that way versus what was suggested?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
That's
sorry.
I mean, I agree with Erica that once we iron out what we want to have on for action items, I can get to that piece. But from a clarity standpoint, we would be clear with the community that we're operating off of committee of the whole. The question wouldn't be there, do we have a policy committee coming up? Do we have a finance committee coming up? It is clear that we're operating committee of the whole, and that's the only committee that we're running. Likewise, if we were to go back to the former committee structure, that would be the only thing then that we would have in that policy to spell out how we handled business leading into committee business, leading into the board meeting.
Carolyn?
That's kind of how I read it when I was going through the packet was, we're just getting rid of the old way and putting in the new committee of the whole. But like, just as I was gonna say before he eloquently said it was, yeah, likewise, if we go back, we would just delete committee of the whole language out of here and have the previous language or any edits that we would need.
I don't think it's that hard to do if we ever switched.
Never said it was hard.
Are you saving it? Like, this is all saved in our history?
Yeah, we have historical
Right.
language that we've had in our policies saved in board docs.
Jerry?
I would like, because like Erica had said before, as a board, we had a choice, where your expertise were. Some of us are better. I would like the first line of the thing to read. The board will appoint board members to serve as board liaisons, and then for us to figure out a way to do that so that people who want to do that would maybe have the chance to do that. Or, I mean, because like when we vote for board president, you can nominate someone. So rather than have the board president will appoint, I think it would be more democratic to have the board appoint liaisons, and then that would be open for however that would happen. I don't know. We haven't had to do it.
Okay with that.
So you make an amendment to that?
That's what you'd like me to do. I will make an amendment to this proposed policy to read, the board will appoint board members to serve as board liaisons.
All right, there's an amendment on the table to change the language to the board appointed liaison. Is there any discussion on that?
I think we have to have a motion in a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. The amendment passes. So we are going to go back to policy 0155 with the amended language of the board appoints the liaison in the committee. I would like to make that motion to pass, or I'd like to make that motion.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments?
May I just ask a clarifying question of
Yes.
the board? So in the second green highlighted paragraph on there, it says, generally the board will conduct committee business while sitting as a committee of the whole. The committee of the whole will defer action to the regular board meeting. However, when items require approval to maintain operations, the committee of the whole will take up action items. This would be, I think, to Erica, to your question earlier as to what would the committee vote on, or what would the committee of the whole vote on. Could I ask the board for some clarification as to what you would want in there? Do you want it specific to personnel items and personnel items only? Or would you like to grant flexibility to the committee to take up other items? And some of them are slipping my mind. They only go back to COVID and all the decisions we had to make back then to allow for continuity of operations.
Well, by that definition, we shouldn't have taken that other vote then, right?
No, we should have.
Oh, absolutely not, because that policy does not affect the continuity.
Again, Joe, I think you're wrong, but maybe I'm wrong.
Does the last policy with the kids sitting at the table, does that affect the continuity of our operations? If it doesn't, taking that vote was inappropriate and against our rules.
I can't weigh in on if a vote is appropriate or not. I would never get in the way of a board doing that. However, what I would say is we have a board meeting coming up on the 28th. And on the 28th, there is the student rep section for the 28th. And so the structure of that meeting would be such where we would either be having people at the table or we would be doing what was approved earlier this evening. So that's how I can answer that question. It would affect how the next board meeting is set up and run, absolutely. And then that would be deferred to, say, September, where the change would happen.
So Joe, I think your question is kind of just solidifying where I'm sitting. Now, while this is not a hill to die on and this is no big deal, and if we want to do it this way, fine, like, not a big deal. But I don't think we should be voting on it, so I will vote no to the motion on the table simply because I think the language needs to be worked out. Because we haven't had these discussions and we haven't seen a potential policy with that discussion in there. Like, I think, yes, personnel items should be the only thing that is an action item at committee of the whole, but that's my opinion.
Have we had a waiving of the first reading?
We did.
Yeah.
Any more discussion?
So, but we do need to clarify the language, correct? We haven't clarified that yet.
Correct. I would be asking for language clarification on that because it is a bylaw of the board. And then if there was a change to it, an amendment could be made, proposed and made to add that language into the policy then.
Well, so we have one amendment to the language already that was passed. So we would need an additional amendment to put something in there, which is why I don't feel like this needs to be rushed and done tonight, so we can make sure we get it right. But again, like, if you guys have opinions on what action items should be allowed at the committee of the whole, it's kind of, it feels like a now or never. So we have to tell Joe what we want put in there by way of another amendment to be voted on before we can vote on this.
What action items do we not want at committee of the whole? Would that be quicker?
Policies that were only brought once, I don't want those. Anything, because it's committee. Committee is a time for discussion, for information. It gives us the 2 weeks to ask questions, to gather information, so we're prepared for the vote. So I actually don't want, personally, any action items outside of personnel stuff, because those are typically
It feels like
up
another
against
board meeting.
time.
Feels like.
Right.
Why?
But there are times when we need to do something.
Just for personnel though, like resignations and appointments.
Is that it?
Well, think back to our committee structure. We actually never had the opportunity, unless we called a special meeting, to vote on anything early. So I don't know that we
Even
need that
even
now.
resignations and.
Correct.
we
In the
never
event of
did.
emergency, so we had to vote on something quick, we'd call a special meeting and take action.
Otherwise, committees didn't.
Otherwise, committees don't take action. It's an advisory time.
All in favor, say aye.
Of what? There's no motion on the table. I would make a motion that we add, the committee of the whole will defer action to the regular board meeting with the exception of time-sensitive personnel matters. That would be my
I
amendment
second it.
motion.
What is the language?
The committee of the whole will defer action to the regular board meeting with the exception of time-sensitive personnel matters.
I'll second.
Cherry already did.
Charity, second.
Oh, third.
We have a motion and a second to change the language. Is there any more discussion on that?
I just want to ask one clarifying question, probably to Joe. Is there a circumstance in which we would need to expand that language for anything?
I think we would just call a special board meeting like what was mentioned.
Okay.
If we had a topic come up that we needed to address.
Are we leaving or striking, however, when items require approval to maintain operations, the committee of the whole will take up action items, or is that being stricken?
Stricken. Takes the place of.
Because that,
Yes.
That is what I was thinking, that it would be stricken.
I'm going to make a motion to table this until our next meeting.
We already have a motion and a second on the amendment vote, and to back that up, we have a motion and a second on your motion to approve it. So I don't think we can add another motion for tabling. Does that sound right?
Yeah, we would have to go through and vote either yea or nay on the,
We'd have to vote nay on everything
Amendment.
and start again.
Right, it would have to fail twice, the amendment and the motion, for you to be able to table it at this point.
Is that the order of precedence?
I don't know, I'm looking right now.
I know.
So we have amendments, and then we have tabling. We can postpone that. It is Robert's rules, if you postpone it, that supersedes the amendment.
I mean, that's fine. That's sort of what I brought
So
up about
that's
10,
what you
15
wanted,
minutes
yes. So I
ago.
don't know why
But
that's-
now we've had the discussion, and now here we sit, and we can either just be done and put it to bed, or, I mean, that's what I asked for a while ago. But then you made a motion to move forward, and I feel like we just finished the
Now there's other
process.
language, other talking, so I thought we cleared up for you. Actually, I'm making this motion for you because you seem like you have more clear language. And so that's why I made the motion, so we can clear it up.
I don't know what to say to that.
Do you, Dale, why are you postponing it?
Just so we can clear up the language and it can all be written out neatly, so then we can go next meeting for our full board meeting, and it's all written out cleanly, and then vote on it.
That would have been helpful for the last committee, or the last policy we just voted on also.
I'll second the motion tabling it.
All right, we have motion and second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no.
No.
Roll call
You-
vote.
Okay. Crosby?
Aye.
Erica?
No.
Jake?
We're voting,
What did you say?
we're
before?
voting on table.
Aye.
Yeah.
You want to table it? That's what. Gail?
Aye.
Dale?
Aye.
Vito?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Craig?
No.
Jerry? No. Vote on it, but it lost, so
Okay, well, it's tabled.
3-6.
Make a motion to move into executive session.
I will second that.
Roll call?
Crosby?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Gail?
Yes.
Dale?
Yes.
Vito?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Jerry?